Chapter 1. Where it all started. Your mind is for having ideas, not holding them. David Allen, author of Getting Things Done. One spring day during my junior year of college, for no apparent reason, I began to feel a small pain in the back of my throat. I thought it was the first sign of a flu coming on, but my doctor couldn't find a trace of illness. It slowly got worse over the next few months, and I began to visit other, more specialized doctors. They all arrived at the same conclusion. There's nothing wrong with you. Yet my pain continued getting worse and worse, with no remedy in sight. Eventually, it became so severe that I had trouble speaking or swallowing or laughing. I did every diagnostic test and scan imaginable, desperately looking for answers for why I was feeling this way. As months and then years passed, I began to lose hope that I would ever find relief. I started taking a powerful anti-seizure medication that temporarily relieved the pain, but there were terrible side effects, including a numbing sensation throughout my body and severe short-term memory loss. Entire trips I took, books I read, and precious experiences with loved ones during this period were wiped from my memory as if they never happened. I was a 24-year-old with the mind of an 80-year-old. As my ability to express myself continued to deteriorate, my discouragement turned to despair. Without the ability to speak freely, so much of what life had to offer, friendships, dating, traveling, and finding a career I was passionate about, seemed like it was slipping away from me. It felt like a dark curtain was being drawn over the stage of my life before I even had a chance to start my performance. A personal turning point: discovering the power of writing things down. One day, sitting in yet another doctor's office waiting for yet another visit, I had an epiphany. I realized in a flash that I was at a crossroads. I could either take responsibility for my own health and my own treatment from that day forward, or I would spend the rest of my life shuttling back and forth between doctors without ever finding resolution. I took out my journal and began to write what I was feeling and thinking. I wrote out the history of my condition through my own lens and in my own words. For the first time, I listed which treatments had helped and which hadn't. I wrote down what I wanted and didn't want, what I was willing to sacrifice and what I wasn't, and what it would mean to me to escape the world of pain I felt trapped within. As the story of my health began to take shape on the page, I knew what I needed to do. I stood up abruptly, walked over to the receptionist, and asked for my complete patient record. She looked at me quizzically, but after I answered a few questions, she turned to her files and began making photocopies. My patient record amounted to hundreds of pages, and I knew I would never be able to keep track of them on paper. I started scanning every page on my family's home computer, turning them into digital records that could be searched, rearranged, annotated, and shared. I became the project manager of my own condition, taking detailed notes on everything my doctors told me, trying out every suggestion they made, and generating questions to review during my next appointment. With all this information in one place, patterns began to emerge. With my doctor's help, I discovered a class of afflictions called functional voice disorders, which included problems with any of the more than 50 pairs of muscles required to properly swallow a piece of food. I realized that the medications I was taking were masking my symptoms, and in the process making it harder to hear what they were telling me. What I had was not an illness or infection that could be eradicated with a pill. It was a functional condition that required changes in how I took care of my body. I began to research how breathing, nutrition, vocal habits, and even past experiences in childhood can be manifested in the nervous system. I started to understand the mind-body connection and how my thoughts and feelings directly impacted the way my body felt. Taking notes on everything I learned, I devised an experiment. I would try a few simple lifestyle changes, such as improving my diet and regular meditation, combined with a series of voice exercises I learned from a voice therapist. To my shock and amazement, it began to work almost immediately. My pain didn't disappear, but it became far more manageable. As I look back, my notes were as important in finding relief as any medicine or procedure. They gave me the chance to step back from the details of my condition and see my situation from a different perspective. For both the outer world of medicine and the inner world of sensations, my notes were a practical medium for turning any new information I encountered into practical solutions I could use. From then on, I became obsessed with the potential of technology to channel the information all around me. I began to realize that the simple act of taking notes on a computer was the tip of an iceberg, because once made digital, notes were no longer limited to short, handwritten scribbles. They could take any form, including images, links, and files of any shape and size. In the digital realm, information could be molded and shipped and directed to any purpose, like a magical, primordial force of nature. I started using digital note-taking in other parts of my life. In my college classes, I turned stacks of disheveled spiral-bound notebooks into an elegant, searchable collection of lessons. I learned to master the process of writing down only the most important points from my classes, reviewing them on demand, and using them to compose an essay or pass a test. I had always been a mediocre student with average grades. My early school teachers would regularly send me home with report cards noting my short attention span and wandering mind. You can't imagine my delight when I graduated from college with a newly straight grade point average and university honors. I had the misfortune of graduating into one of the worst job markets in a generation. In the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis, faced with few employment opportunities in the United States, I decided to join the Peace Corps, an overseas volunteer program that sent Americans to serve in developing countries. I was accepted and assigned to a small school in the eastern Ukrainian countryside, where I would spend 2 years teaching English to students aged 8 to 18. Working as a teacher with few resources and little support, my note-taking system once again became my lifeline. I saved examples of lessons and exercises anywhere I found them, from textbooks, websites, and USB drives passed around by other teachers. I mixed and matched English phrases, expressions, and slang into word games to keep my energetic third graders engaged. I taught the older students the basics of personal productivity, how to keep a schedule, how to take notes in class, and how to set goals and plan their education. I will never forget their appreciation as they grew up and used those skills to apply to universities and succeed in their first jobs. Years later, I still regularly receive messages of gratitude as the productivity skills I taught my former students continue to bear fruit in their lives. I returned to the US after 2 years of service and was thrilled to land a job as an analyst at a small consulting firm in San Francisco. As excited as I was to start my career, I was also faced with a major challenge. The pace of work was frantic and overwhelming. Moving straight from rural Ukraine to the epicenter of Silicon Valley, I was utterly unprepared for the constant barrage of inputs that is a normal part of modern workplaces. Every day I received hundreds of emails. Every hour dozens of messages, and the pings and dings from every device merged into a ceaseless melody of interruption. I remember looking around at my colleagues and wondering, how can anyone get anything done here? What's their secret? I knew only one trick, and it started with writing things down. I started taking notes on everything I was learning using a note-taking app on my computer. I took notes during meetings, on phone calls, and while doing research online. I wrote down facts gleaned from research, papers that could be used in the slides we presented to clients. I wrote down tidbits of insight I came across on social media to share on our own social channels. I wrote down feedback from my more experienced colleagues so I could make sure I digested it and took it to heart. Every time we started a new project, I created a dedicated place on my computer for the information related to it, where I could sort through it all and decide on a plan of action. As the information tide receded, I started to gain a sense of confidence in my ability to find exactly what I needed when I needed it. I became the go-to person in the office for finding that one file, or unearthing that one fact, or remembering exactly what the client had said 3 weeks earlier. You know the feeling of satisfaction when you are the only one in the room who remembers an important detail. That feeling became the prize in my personal pursuit to capitalize on the value of what I knew. Another shift discovering the power of sharing. My collection of notes and files had always been for my own personal use, but as I worked on consulting projects for some of the most important organizations in the world, I started to realize that it could be a business asset as well. I learned from one of the reports we published that the value of physical capital in the US, land, machinery, and buildings, for example, is about $10 trillion, but that value is dwarfed by the total value of human capital, which is estimated to be 5 to 10 times larger. Human capital includes the knowledge and the know-how embodied in humans, their education, their experience, their wisdom, their skills, their relationships, their common sense, their intuition. If that was true, Was it possible that my personal collection of notes was a knowledge asset that could grow and compound over time? I began to see my as yet unnamed second brain not just as a note-taking tool but as a loyal confidant and thought partner. When I was forgetful, it always remembered. When I lost my way, it reminded me where we were going. When I felt stuck and at a loss for ideas, it suggested possibilities and pathways. At one point, some of my colleagues asked me to teach them my organizing methods. I found that virtually all of them already used various productivity tools, such as paper notepads or the apps on their smartphones, but that very few did so in a systematic, intentional way. They tended to move information around from place to place haphazardly, reacting to the demands of the moment, never quite trusting that they'd be able to find it again. Every new productivity app promised a breakthrough, but usually ended up becoming yet another thing to manage. Casual lunchtime chats with my colleagues turned into a book club, which became a workshop, which eventually evolved into a paid class, open to the public. As I taught what I knew to more and more people and saw the immediate difference it made in their work and lives, it began to dawn on me that I had discovered something very special. My experience managing my chronic condition had taught me a way of getting organized that was ideal for solving problems and producing results now, not in some far-off future. Applying that approach to other areas of my life, I had found a way to organize information holistically for a variety of purposes, for any project or goal instead of only for one-off tasks. And more than that, I discovered that once I had that information at hand, I could easily and generously share it in all kinds of ways to serve the people around me. The origins of the second brain system. I began to call the system I had developed my second brain and started a blog to share my ideas about how it worked. These ideas resonated with a much wider audience than I ever expected, and my work was eventually featured in publications such as the Harvard Business Review, The Atlantic, Fast Company, and Inc., among others. An article I wrote about how to use digital note-taking to enhance creativity went viral in the productivity community, and I was invited to speak and teach workshops at influential companies like Genentech, Toyota, and the Inter-American Development Bank. In early 2017, I decided to create an online course called Building a Second Brain to teach my system on a wider scale. In the years since, that program has produced thousands of graduates from more than 100 countries and every walk of life, creating an engaged and inquisitive community where the lessons in this book have been honed and refined. In the next couple of chapters, I'll show you how the practice of creating a second brain is part of a long legacy of thinkers and creators who came before us, writers, scientists, philosophers, leaders, and everyday people who strive to remember and achieve more. Then I'll introduce you to a few basic principles and tools you'll need to set yourself up to succeed. Part 2, the method, introduces each of the 4 steps you'll follow to build a second brain so you can immediately begin to capture and share ideas with more intention. And Part 3, making things happen, offers a set of powerful ways to use your second brain to enhance your productivity, accomplish your goals, and thrive in your work and life. I've shared my story with you because I want you to know that this book isn't about perfectly optimizing some kind of idealized life. Everyone experiences pain, makes mistakes, and struggles at some point in their lives. I've had my fair share of challenges, but at each stage of my journey, treating my thoughts as treasures worth keeping has been the pivotal element in everything I've overcome and achieved. You may find this book in the self-improvement category, but in a deeper sense it is the opposite of self-improvement. It is about optimizing a system outside yourself, a system not subject to your limitations and constraints, leaving you happily unoptimized and free to roam, to wander toward whatever makes you feel alive here and now in each moment. I was aided in this effort by my involvement with the Quantified Self community, a network of local meetup groups in which people shared their stories about how they track their health, productivity, mood, or behavior to learn more about themselves. Interested readers can find out more at Building a Second Brain, divided by course. Chapter 2. What is a second brain? We extend beyond our limits, not by revving our brains like a machine, or bulking them up like a muscle, but by strewing our world with rich materials, and by weaving them into our thoughts. Annie Murphy Paul, author of The Extended Mind. Information is the fundamental building block of everything you do. Anything you might want to accomplish executing a project at work, Getting a new job, learning a new skill, starting a business requires finding and putting to use the right information. Your professional success and quality of life depend directly on your ability to manage information effectively. According to the New York Times, the average person's daily consumption of information now adds up to a remarkable 34 gigabytes. One separate study cited by the Times estimates that we consume the equivalent of 174 full newspapers worth of content each and every day, 5 times higher than in 1986 too. Instead of empowering us, this deluge of information offered from the International Data Corporation found that 26% of a typical knowledge worker's day is spent looking for and consolidating information spread across a variety of systems. For incredibly, only 56% of the time are they able to find the information required to do their jobs. In other words, we go to work 5 days per week, but spend more than one of those days on average just looking for the information we need to do our work. Half the time, we don't even succeed in doing that. It's time for us to upgrade our Paleolithic memory. It's time to acknowledge that we can't use our head to store everything we need to know and to outsource the job of remembering to intelligent machines. We have to recognize that the cognitive demands of modern life increase every year, but we're still using the same brains as 200,000 years ago, when modern humans first emerged on the plains of East Africa. Every bit of energy we spend straining to recall things is energy not spent doing the thinking that only humans can do, inventing new things, crafting stories, recognizing patterns, following our intuition, collaborating with others, investigating new subjects, making plans, testing theories. Every minute we spend trying to mentally juggle all the stuff we have to do leaves less time for more meaningful pursuits like cooking, self-care, hobbies, resting, and spending time with loved ones. However, there's a catch. Ever changing how we use technology also requires a changing how we think. To properly take advantage of the power of a second brain, we need a new relationship to information, to technology, and even to ourselves. The legacy of commonplace books. For insight into our own time, we can look to history for lessons on what worked in other eras. The practice of writing down one's thoughts and notes to help make sense of the world has a long legacy. For centuries, artists and intellectuals from Leonardo da Vinci to Virginia Woolf, from John Locke to Octavia Butler, have recorded the ideas they found most interesting in a book they carried around with them, known as a commonplace book. Popularized in a previous period of information overload, the Industrial Revolution of the 18th and early 19th centuries, the commonplace book was more than a diary or journal of personal reflections. It was a learning tool that the educated class used to understand a rapidly changing world and their place in it. In the case for books, 5 historian and former director of the Harvard University Library Robert Darnton explains the role of commonplace books. Unlike modern readers, who follow the flow of a narrative from beginning to end, early modern Englishmen read in fits and starts and jumped from book to book. They broke texts into fragments and assembled them into new patterns by transcribing them in different sections of their notebooks. Then they reread the copies and rearranged the patterns while adding more excerpts. Reading and writing were therefore inseparable activities. They belonged to a continuous effort to make sense of things, for the world was full of signs. You could read your way through it, and by keeping an account of your readings, you made a book of your own, one stamped with your personality. Commonplace books were a portal through which educated people interacted with the world. They drew on their notebooks in conversation and used them to connect bits of knowledge from different sources and to inspire their own thinking. As a society, all of us could benefit from the modern equivalent of a commonplace book. The media landscape of today is oriented toward what is novel and public, the latest political controversy, the new celebrity scandal, or the viral meme of the day. Resurrecting the commonplace book allows us to stem the tide, shifting our relationship with information toward the timeless and the private. Instead of consuming ever greater amounts of content, we could take on a more patient, thoughtful approach that favors rereading, reformulating, and working through the implications of ideas over time. Not only could this lead to more civil discussions about the important topics of the day, it could also preserve our mental health and heal our splintered attention. But this isn't simply a return to the past. We now have the opportunity to supercharge the custom of commonplace books for the modern era. We have the chance to turn that historical practice into something far more flexible and convenient. The digital commonplace book. Once our notes and observations become digital, they can be searched, organized and synced across all our devices, and backed up to the cloud for safekeeping. Instead of randomly scribbling down notes on pieces of paper, hoping we'll be able to find them later, we can cultivate our very own knowledge vault so we always know exactly where to look. Writer and photographer Craig Mudd wrote, "There is a gaping opportunity to consolidate our myriad marginal IV into an even more robust commonplace book, one searchable, always accessible, easily shared and embedded amongst the digital text we consume."
Yeah.
This digital commonplace book is what I call a second brain. Think of it as the combination of a study notebook, a personal journal, and a sketchbook for new ideas. It is a multi-purpose tool that can adapt to your changing needs over time. In school or courses you take, it can be used to take notes for studying. At work, it can help you organize your projects. At home, it can help you manage your household. However you decide to use it, your second brain is a private knowledge collection designed to serve a lifetime of learning and growth, not just a single use case. It is a laboratory where you can develop and refine your thinking in solitude before sharing it with others. A studio where you can experiment with ideas until they are ready to be put to use in the outside world. A whiteboard where you can sketch out your ideas and collaborate on them with others. As soon as you understand that we naturally use digital tools to extend our thinking beyond the bounds of our skulls, you start to see second brains everywhere. A calendar app is an extension of your brain's ability to remember events, ensuring you never forget an appointment. Your smartphone is an extension of your ability to communicate, allowing your voice to reach across oceans and continents. Cloud storage is an extension of your brain's memory, allowing you to store thousands of gigabytes and access them from anywhere. It's time to add digital notes to our repertoire and further enhance our natural capabilities using technology. Rethinking note-taking. Notes as knowledge, building blocks. In past centuries, only the intellectual elite needed commonplace books writers, politicians, philosophers, and scientists who had a reason to synthesize their writing or research. Nowadays, almost everyone needs a way to manage information. More than half the workforce today can be considered knowledge workers, professionals for whom knowledge is their most valuable asset, and who spend a majority of their time managing large amounts of information. In addition, no matter what our formal role is, all of us have to come up with new ideas, solve novel problems, and communicate with others effectively. We have to do these things regularly, reliably, not just once in a while. As a knowledge worker, where does your knowledge live? Where does your knowledge go when it's created or discovered? Knowledge can seem like a lofty concept, reserved exclusively for scholars and academics. But at the most practical level, knowledge begins with the simple, time-honored practice of taking notes. For many people, their understanding of note-taking was formed in school. You were probably first told to write something down because it would be on the test. This implied that the minute the test was over, you would never reference those notes again. Learning was treated as essentially disposable, with no intention of that knowledge being useful for the long term. When you enter the professional world, the demands on your note-taking change completely. The entire approach to note-taking you learned in school is not only obsolete, it's the exact opposite of what you need. In the professional world, it's not at all clear what you should be taking notes on. No one tells you when or how your notes will be used. The test can come at any time and in any form. You're allowed to reference your notes at any time, provided you took them in the first place. You are expected to take action on your notes, not just regurgitate them. This isn't the same note-taking you learned in school. It's time to elevate the status of notes from test prep and humble scribblings into something far more interesting and dynamic. For modern, professional note-taking, a note is a knowledge-building block, a discrete unit of information interpreted through your unique perspective and stored outside your head. By this definition, a note could include a passage from a book or article that you were inspired by, a photo or image from the web with your annotations, or a bullet point list of your meandering thoughts on a topic, among many other examples. A note could include a single quote from a film that really struck you, all the way to thousands of words you saved from an in-depth book. The length and format don't matter if a piece of content has been interpreted through your lens, curated according to your taste, translated into your own words, or drawn from your life experience, and stored in a secure place. Then it qualifies as a note. A knowledge-building block is discrete. It stands on its own and has intrinsic value. But knowledge-building blocks can also be combined into something much greater: report. An argument, a proposal, a story. Like the Lego blocks you may have played with as a kid, it can be rapidly searched, retrieved, moved around, assembled, and reassembled into new forms without requiring you to invent anything from scratch. You need to put in the effort to create a note only once, and then you can just mix and match and try out different combinations until something clicks. Technology doesn't just make note-taking more efficient, it transforms the very nature of notes. No longer do we have to write our thoughts on post-it or notepads that are fragile, easy to lose, and impossible to search. Now we write notes in the cloud, and the cloud follows us everywhere. No longer do we have to spend countless hours meticulously cataloging and transcribing our thoughts on paper. Now we collect knowledge building blocks and spend our time imagining the possibilities for what they could become. A tale of two brains. Let me paint a picture of a day in the life of someone who doesn't have a second brain and someone who does. See if either of these descriptions sounds familiar. Nina wakes up on Monday morning, and before her eyes even open, thoughts are flooding her brain. Things to do, things to think about, things to decide. It all comes rushing in from the depths of her subconscious, where it's been simmering all weekend. Nina's thoughts continue to swirl around her brain as she gets ready for work. Like jittery birds, they flit and flutter around her head because they have nowhere else to rest. There is a constant hum of background anxiety that she has come to expect, as she wonders what needs her attention and what she may be missing. After a hectic morning, Nina finally sits down at her desk to start her workday, opens up her email inbox, and is instantly engulfed by a torrent of new messages, flashing with urgent subject lines and the names of important senders. These demands fill her with a cold adrenaline rush. She knows that her morning is shot, her own plans ruined. Pushing aside the important work she wanted to focus on this morning, Nina settles in for a long slog of replying to emails. By the time she gets back from lunch, Nina is finally done handling the most urgent issues. It's finally time to focus on the priorities she's set for herself. This is when the reality sets in. After a morning spent fighting fires, she's far too scatterbrained and tired to focus. Like so many times before, Nina lowers her expectations, settling for chipping away slowly at her ever-expanding to-do list full of other people's priorities. After work, Nina has one last chance to work on the project that she knows will make use of her talents and take her career to the next level. She exercises, eats dinner, and spends some quality time with the kids. As they go to bed, she's filled with enthusiasm that she finally gets some time to herself. She sits down at the computer, and the questions begin. Where did I leave off last time? Where did I put that file? Where are all my notes? By the time Nina gets set up and ready to go, she's far too tired to make real progress. This pattern repeats itself day after day. After enough of these false starts, she starts to give up. Why even try? Why keep attempting to do the impossible? Why resist the temptation to watch another Netflix episode or scroll through social media without the time and energy to move things decisively forward? What's the point of starting? Nina is a competent, responsible, and hardworking professional. Many people would feel privileged to be in her shoes. There's nothing wrong with the work she does or the life she leads. Yet underneath the respectable exterior, there is something missing. She isn't meeting her own standards for what she knows she's capable of. There are experiences that she wants for herself and her family that seem to continuously get postponed, waiting for someday when somehow she will have the time and space to make them happen. Does anything about Nina's experience sound familiar? Every detail of her story is real, drawn from messages people have sent me over the years. Their stories convey a pervasive feeling of discontent and dissatisfaction, the experience of facing an endless onslaught of demands on their time, their innate curiosity and imagination withering away under the suffocating weight of obligation. So many of us share the feeling that we are surrounded by knowledge, yet starving for wisdom. That despite all the mind-expanding ideas we have access to, the quality of our attention is only getting worse, that we are paralyzed by the conflict between our responsibilities and our most heartfelt passions, so that we're never quite able to focus, and also never quite able to rest. There is an alternative story, a different way a Monday morning can go. It is also drawn from the real-life stories I've received, this time from people who have built a second brain for themselves. You wake up Monday morning, looking forward to starting your day and your week. As you get out of bed, take a shower, and get dressed, the thoughts start arriving. You have just as many worries and responsibilities as anyone else, but you also have a secret weapon. In the shower, you suddenly realize there's a better way to advance the project you're focused on. At work, as you step out onto the mat, you jot down the idea as a digital note on your smartphone. Over breakfast with your family, you find your mind already working out the new strategy, pondering its implications. Those thoughts get jotted down as well in the brief moments between feeding the kids and sending them off to school. As you drive to work, you start realizing there are challenges you haven't considered. You dictate a quick audio memo to your phone as you drive, which gets automatically transcribed and saved in your notes. Monday morning in the office is the usual whirlwind, with emails and chat messages and phone calls arriving at their usual frantic pace. As you share your new idea with your colleagues, they start asking questions, pointing out valid concerns, and adding their own contributions. At each of these moments, you are ready to save them as notes in your second brain. You withhold judgment, seeking to gather the widest possible range of feedback before deciding on a course of action. Before you know it, it's lunchtime. As you take a break to grab a bite to eat, your thoughts turn philosophical. What is the ultimate point of the project? And are we forgetting it? How does it fit into the long-term vision of the product we want to build? What is the impact of the new strategy on shareholders, customers, suppliers, and the environment? You have only 30 minutes to eat lunch, and you don't have time to ponder these questions in depth, but you note them down as a reminder to think about later. You are on your smartphone just like everyone else, but you aren't doing what they are doing. You are creating value instead of killing time. By the time the afternoon meeting comes around to review the strategy you've come up with, you already have a formidable collection of notes ready and waiting. The ideas, strategies, objectives, challenges, questions, concerns, contributions, and reminders you've collected over just a few hours on a Monday morning. You take 10 minutes before the meeting starts to organize your notes. About a third of them are a priority, and you put them aside. Another third are critical, and you make them into an agenda for the meeting. The remaining third are somewhere in between, and you put them into a separate list to refer to if appropriate. As the meeting begins, the team sits down to start discussing the project. You are already prepared. You've already considered the biggest problems from several different angles, mapped out a number of possible solutions, and started thinking about the big picture implications. You've even received feedback from some of your colleagues and incorporated it into your recommendations. You argue for your point of view while also remaining open to the perspectives of your team. Your goal is to stay present and guide the conversation to the best possible outcome, making use of everyone's unique way of seeing things. All the important reflections, new ideas, and unexpected possibilities your colleagues come up with also get recorded in your second brain. As this way of working with information continues over days and weeks and months, the way your mind works begins to change. You start to see recurring patterns in your thinking, why you do things, what you really want, and what's really important to you. Your second brain becomes like a mirror, teaching you about yourself and reflecting back to you the ideas worth keeping and acting on. Your mind starts to become intertwined with this system, leaning on it to remember more than you ever could on your own. All this is literally not just in your head. People can tell there is something different about you. They start to recognize that you can draw on an unusually large body of knowledge at a moment's notice. They remark on your amazing memory, but what they don't know is that you never even try to remember anything. They admire your incredible dedication to developing your thinking over time. In reality, you're just planting seeds of inspiration and harvesting them as they flower. As you begin to see all the knowledge you've gained in tangible form, it dawns on you that you already have everything you need to strike out toward the future you want. There's no need to wait until you're perfectly prepared. No need to consume more information or do more research. All that's left is for you to take action on what you already know and already have, which is laid out before you in meticulous detail. Your brain is no longer the bottleneck on your potential, which means you have all the bandwidth you need to pursue any endeavor and make it successful. This sense of confidence in the quality of your thinking gives you the freedom to ask deeper questions and the courage to pursue bigger challenges. You can't fail, because failure is just more information to be captured and used as fuel for your journey. This is what it's like to build and harness the power of a second brain, leveraging technology as thinking tools. Throughout the 20th century, a series of scholars, INNOVATO or S7, offered a vision for how technology could change humanity for the better. They dreamed of creating an extended mind that would amplify human intellect and help us solve the greatest problems facing society. The possibility of such a technological marvel shined like a beacon for the future, promising to liberate knowledge from dusty old books and make it universally accessible and useful. Their efforts were not in vain. Those ideas inspired much of the technology that we use every day. But paradoxically, despite all the technological inventions of the information age, we are in some ways further from their original vision than ever. We spend hours every day interacting with social media updates that will be forgotten in minutes. We bookmark articles to read later, but rarely find the time to revisit them again. We create documents that are used once and then get abandoned in the abyss of our email or file systems. So much of our intellectual output, from brainstorms to photos to planning to research, too often is left stranded on hard drives or lost somewhere in the cloud. I believe that we have reached an inflection point where technology has become sufficiently advanced and user-friendly that we can integrate it with our biological brains. Computers have become smaller, more powerful, and more intuitive, to the point that they are unmistakably an essential component of how we think. The time has come for us to realize the vision of technology's early pioneers, that everyone should have an extended mind, not just to remember more and be more productive, but to lead more fulfilling lives. Herbert Simon, an American economist and cognitive psychologist, wrote, "What information consumes is rather obvious. It consumes the attention of its recipients. Hence, a wealth of information creates a poverty of attention." The word commonplace can be traced back to ancient Greece, where a speaker in law courts or political meetings would keep an assortment of arguments in a common place for easy reference. The practice of keeping personal notes also arose in other countries, such as Beijing, China, roughly translated as notebook, which could contain anecdotes, quotations, random musings, literary criticism, short fictional stories, and anything else that a person thought worth recording. In Japan, Zuihitsu, known as kilo books, were collections of notebooks used to document a person's life. Marginalia refers to the marks made in the margins of a book or other document, including scribbles, comments, annotations, critiques, doodles, or illustrations. Have you ever lost your smartphone or been unable to access the internet and felt like a critical part of yourself was missing? That's a sign that an external tool has become an extension of your mind. In a 2004 study, Angelo Moravita and Atsushi Iriki discovered that when monkeys and humans consistently use a tool to extend their reach, such as using a rake to reach an object, certain neural networks in the brain change their map of the body to include the new tool. This fascinating finding reinforces the idea that external tools can, and often do, become a natural extension of our minds. The recent advancements and discoveries in the field of extended cognition have shed new light on how practical and powerful it can be to think outside the brain. This book isn't focused on the science, but for an excellent introduction to extended cognition, I recommend The Extended Mind by Annie Murphy Paul. Vannevar Bush wrote of a scholar's workstation called a Memex, which was a device in which an individual stores all his books, records, and communications, and which is mechanized so that it may be consulted with exceeding speed and flexibility. It is an enlarged intimate supplement to his memory. Chapter 3. How a Second Brain Works. It is in the power of remembering that the self's ultimate freedom consists. I am free because I remember. Abhinavagupta, 10th century Kashmiri philosopher and mystic. Think of your second brain as the world's best personal assistant. It is perfectly reliable and totally consistent. It is always ready and waiting to capture any bit of information that might be of value to you. It follows directions, makes helpful suggestions, and reminds you of what's important to you. What would the job description for such a personal assistant look like? What jobs would you hire them to do for you? The same way you would hold your assistant accountable to a certain standard of performance. The same is true for your second brain. You need to know what it should be doing for you so you know if it's worth keeping around. In this chapter, we'll see how the four main capabilities of a second brain will actively work for you immediately and over time. The one basic tool you'll need to get started. How your second brain will evolve to serve what is most important to you. And, finally, an introduction to the 4 steps of the D method that lies at the heart of it. The superpowers of a second brain. There are 4 essential capabilities that we can rely on a second brain to perform. 4 US. Making our ideas concrete. Revealing new associations between ideas. Incubating our ideas over time. Sharpening our unique perspectives. Let's examine each of these. Second brain superpower 1. Make our ideas concrete. Before we do anything with our ideas, we have to offload them from our minds and put them into concrete form. Only when we declutter our brain of complex ideas can we think clearly and start to work with those ideas effectively. In 1953, American biologist James Watson and English physicist Francis Crick made a profound discovery. The structure of DNA was a double helix. Their discovery was built on the groundwork laid by other pioneers, including advancements in X-ray crystallography by Rosalind Franklin and Maurice Wilkins, and ushered in a golden age in molecular biology and genetics. Watson and Crick's breakthrough is well recognized, but there is a part of their story that is much less well known. An important tool of the researchers was building physical models, an approach they borrowed from American biochemist Linus Pauling. They made cardboard cutouts to approximate the shapes of the molecules they knew were part of DNA's makeup and, like a puzzle, experimented with different ways of putting them together. They would shift around their models on their desktops, trying to find a shape that fit everything they knew about how the molecules were arranged. The double helix structure seemed to fit all known constraints, allowing the complementary base pairs to fit together perfectly while respecting the ratios between elements that had been measured previously. Point 1. This is a remarkable aspect of one of the most famous scientific discoveries of the last century. At the decisive moment, even highly trained scientists deeply familiar with mathematical and abstract thinking turn to the most basic, ancient medium available: physical stuff. Digital notes aren't physical, but they are visual. They turn vague concepts into tangible entities that can be observed, rearranged, edited, and combined together. They may exist only in virtual form, but we can still see them with our eyes and move them around with our fingers. As researchers Deborah Chambers and Daniel Reisberg found in their research on the limits of mental visualization, the skills we have developed for dealing with the external world go beyond those we have for dealing with the internal world. Second brain superpower 2. Reveal new associations between ideas. In its most practical form, creativity is about connecting ideas together, especially ideas that don't seem to be connected. Neuroscientist Nancy C. Andreessen, in her extensive research on highly creative people including accomplished scientists, mathematicians, artists, and writers, came to the conclusion that creative people are better at recognizing relationships, making associations and connections. By keeping diverse kinds of material in one place, we facilitate this connectivity and increase the likelihood that we'll notice an unusual association. Quotes from a philosophy book written in ancient times might sit next to the latest clever tweet. Screenshots from an interesting YouTube video can live right by scenes from classic movies. An audio memo might be saved alongside project plans, a link to a helpful website, and a PDF with the latest research findings. All these formats can be combined in a way that would be impossible in the physical world. If you've ever played the word tile game, Scrabble, you know the best way to come up with new words is to mix up the letters in different combinations until a word jumps out at you. In our second brain we can do the same. Mix up the order of our ideas until something unexpected emerges. The more diverse and unusual the material you put into it in the first place, the more original the connections that will emerge. Second brain superpower 3. Incubate our ideas over time. Too often, when we take on a task, planning an event, designing a product, or leading an initiative, draw only on the ideas we have access to right in that moment. I call this approach a heavy lift, demanding instantaneous results from our brains without the benefit of a support system. Even when we do a brainstorm, that still relies only on ideas that we can think up right now. What are the chances that the most creative, most innovative approaches will instantly be top of mind? What are the odds that the best way to move forward is one of the first ways we come up with? This tendency is known as recency bias. Point 4. We tend to favor the ideas, solutions, and influences that occurred to us most recently, regardless of whether they are the best ones. Now imagine if you were able to unshackle yourself from the limits of the present moment and draw on weeks, months, or even years of accumulated imagination. I call this approach the slow burn, allowing bits of thought matter to slowly simmer, like a delicious pot of stew brewing on the stove. It is a calmer, more sustainable approach to creativity that relies on the gradual accumulation of ideas instead of all-out binges of manic hustle. Having a second brain where lots of ideas can be permanently saved for the long term turns the passage of time into your friend instead of your enemy. Second brain superpower 4. Sharpen our unique perspectives. Until now we've talked mostly about gathering the ideas of others, but the ultimate purpose of a second brain is to allow your own thinking to shine. A recent study from Princeton University found that there is a certain kind of job that is least likely to be automated by machines in coming years. Surprisingly, it wasn't jobs that required advanced skills or years of training that were predicted to fare best. It was jobs that required the ability to convey not just information but a particular interpretation of information. In other words, the jobs that are most likely to stick around are those that involve promoting or defending a particular perspective. Think of a fundraising organizer sharing stories of the impact their nonprofit has made, a researcher using data to back up their interpretation of an experiment, or a project manager citing a couple of key precedents to support a decision. Our careers and businesses depend more than ever on our ability to advance a particular point of view and persuade others to adopt it as well. Point 6. Advocating for a particular point of view isn't just a matter of sparkling charisma or irresistible charm. It takes supporting material. American journalist, author, and filmmaker Sebastian Junger once wrote on the subject of writer's block, "It's not that I'm blocked. It's that I don't have enough research to write with power and knowledge about that topic. It always means not that I can't find the right words, but rather that I don't have the ammunition." When you feel stuck in your creative pursuits, it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. You haven't lost your touch or run out of creative juice. It just means you don't yet have enough raw material to work with. If it feels like the well of inspiration has run dry, it's because you need a deeper well full of examples, illustrations, stories, statistics, diagrams, analogies, metaphors, photos, mind maps, conversation notes, quotes, anything that will help you argue for your perspective or fight for a cause you believe in. Choosing a note-taking app, the neurocenter of your second brain, the same technology that has fueled an explosion in the volume of information coming our way, has also provided the tools to help you manage it. While your second brain is made up of all the tools you use to interact with information, including a to-do list, a calendar, email, and reading apps, for example, there is one category of software I recommend as the centerpiece of your second brain: a digital note-taking app. There are plentiful options available, from the free Notes app that can pre-installed on your smartphone to third-party software you can download with exactly the features you need. From Microsoft OneNote, Google Keep, and Apple Notes to Notion and Evernote, digital notes apps have 4 powerful characteristics that make them ideal for building a second brain. They are multimedia. Just like a paper notebook might contain drawings and sketches, quotes and ideas, and even a pasted photo or post-it, a Notes app can store a wide variety of different kinds of content in one place, so you never need to wonder where to put something. Informal notes are inherently messy, so there's no need for perfect spelling or polished presentation. This makes it as easy and frictionless as possible to jot things down as soon as they occur to you, which is essential to allow nascent ideas to grow. Open-ended. Taking notes is a continuous process that never really ends, and you don't always know where it might lead. Unlike more specialized kinds of software that are designed to produce a specific kind of output, such as slide decks, spreadsheets, graphics, or videos, notes are ideal for free-form exploration before you have a goal in mind. Action-oriented. Unlike a library or research database, personal notes don't need to be comprehensive or precise. They are designed to help you quickly capture stray thoughts so you can remain focused on the task at hand. All 4 of the above qualities are shared by paper notes, but when we make them digital, we can supercharge these timeless benefits with the incredible capabilities of technology: searching, sharing, backups, editing, linking, syncing between devices, and many others. Digital notes combine the casual artistry of a daily sketchbook with the scientific power of modern software. Choosing which apps and tools you'll use is a personal decision. and depends on which mobile device you use, the needs of your job or business, and even your own temperament and taste. The software landscape is dynamic and constantly changing. New apps regularly come out, and existing ones release innovative new features. You can find a free, continually updated guide to choosing your Notes app and other second brain tools at Building a Second Brain, divided by resources. Although you will always use many different software programs to manage information and do your work, from word processors to messaging platforms and project management tools used within your organization, your Notes app is uniquely designed to facilitate personal knowledge management. A good place to start is to look at the apps you already have and perhaps are already using. You can always start now with a basic option and upgrade later as your needs get more sophisticated. Most important of all, don't get caught in the trap of perfectionism, insisting that you have to have the perfect app with a precise set of features before you take a single note. It's not about having the perfect tools, it's about having a reliable set of tools you can depend on, knowing you can always change them later. Remembering, connecting, creating, the 3 stages of personal knowledge management. As people set out on their second brain journey, there are 3 stages of progress I often observe and even encourage. Those stages are remembering, connecting, and creating. It takes time to fully unlock the value of using digital tools to enhance and extend what our minds are capable of. But there are also distinct benefits at every step along the way. The first way that people tend to use their second brain is as a memory aid. They use their digital notes to save facts and ideas that they would have trouble recalling otherwise. Takeaways from meetings, quotes from interviews, or the details of a project. For example, Camille is the co-founder and lead designer of a startup in Quebec, Canada. She uses her second brain to save excerpts from the many research reports and studies she reads as part of her work designing electric vehicle charging stations for large residential buildings. Most of these reports are published as PDFs, a notoriously inflexible and difficult-to-use format. But by importing the findings most relevant to her work into her notes, she can add as many annotations and comments as she wants. The second way that people use their second brain is to connect ideas together. Their second brain evolves from being primarily a memory tool to becoming a thinking tool. A piece of advice from a mentor comes in handy as they encounter a similar situation on a different team. An illuminating metaphor from a book finds its way into a presentation they're delivering. The ideas they've captured begin gravitating toward each other and cross-pollinating. Fernando is an oncologist at a world-renowned hospital who uses his second brain to organize his patient notes. He summarizes the key points from each patient as health history with a special focus on how long they've had the condition, which treatments they've received, and key features of their tumor. Fernando uses his second brain to connect what he knows from his training and research to the needs of his patients to be able to treat them more effectively. Eventually, the third and final way that people use their second brain is for creating new things. They realize that they have a lot of knowledge on a subject and decide to turn it into something concrete and shareable. Seeing so much supporting material ready and waiting gives them the courage to put their own ideas out there and have a positive impact on others. Taro is a young father of 3 working a demanding job at a large tech company in Texas. After taking my course, he used his second brain to start a YouTube channel where he shares stories and tips on parenting. For example, he's made videos on how to travel internationally with kids and how to request paternity leave, and shared clips from weekend trips he's taken with his family. Being able to keep track of all the video ideas and production details outside his head has been crucial in allowing Taro to balance his side gig with his full-time career, while still having enough time with his kids. He is using his second brain to express himself and create the content he wants to see in the world. Each of these individuals has leveraged technology to remember, connect, and create far more effectively than if they had to do it on their own. They use their second brain in ways that complement the current season of their lives. As those seasons change, they will be able to adapt how they use their notes so that they remain relevant and useful. Introducing the D method, the 4 steps to remembering what matters. To guide you in the process of creating your own second brain, I've developed a simple, intuitive 4-part method called D: capture, organize, distill, express. These are the steps not only to build your second brain in the first place, but also to work with it going forward. Each of these steps represents a timeless principle found throughout humanity's history. From the earliest cave paintings to the artisan workshops of the Renaissance to the most cutting-edge modern fields, they are flexible and agnostic for any profession, role, or career, and for whatever note-taking methods and platforms you prefer. I'm even willing to bet that you are doing them already in some form, whether you realize it or not. D is a map for navigating the endless streams of information we are now faced with every day. It is a modern approach to creating a commonplace oak, adapted to the needs of the information age. The same way we have a genetic code that determines our height and eye color, we also have a creative code that is hardwired into our imagination. It shapes how we think and how we interact with the world. It is mirrored in the software code that runs the apps we use to handle information. It's also been a secret code for most of history. Now it's finally time to reveal how it works. Let's preview each of the 4 steps of the D method: capture, organize, distill, and express, and then we'll dive into the details in the following chapters. Capture: keep what resonates. Every time we turn on our smartphone or computer, we are immediately immersed in the flow of juicy content they present. Much of this information is useful and interesting. How-to articles that could make you more productive, podcasts with experts sharing hard-won lessons, or inspiring photos of travel destinations we might want to visit. Here's the problem: we can't consume every bit of this information stream. We will quickly be exhausted and overwhelmed if we try. We need to adopt the perspective of a curator, stepping back from the raging river and starting to make intentional decisions about what information we want to fill our minds. Like a scientist capturing only the rarest butterflies to take back to the lab, our goal should be to capture only the ideas and insights we think are truly noteworthy. Content tends to pile up all around us even without our involvement. There are probably emails filling your inbox, updates popping up in your social media feeds, and notifications proliferating on your smartphone as you're reading this. It's already there, but we tend to capture it haphazardly. At best, you might email yourself a quick note, brainstorm some ideas in a document, or highlight quotes in a book you're reading, but that information probably remains disconnected and scattered. The insights you uncovered through serious mental effort remain hidden in forgotten folders or drifting in the cloud. The solution is to keep only what resonates in a trusted place that you control, and to leave the rest aside. When something resonates, it moves you on an intuitive level. Often, the ideas that resonate are the ones that are most unusual, counterintuitive, interesting, or potentially useful. Don't make it an analytical decision, and don't worry about why exactly it resonates. Just look inside for a feeling of pleasure, curiosity, wonder, or excitement, and let that be your signal for when it is time to capture a passage, an image, a quote, or a fact. By training ourselves to notice when something resonates with us, we can improve not only our ability to take better notes, but also our understanding of ourselves and what makes us tick. It is a way of turning up the volume on our intuition so we can hear the wisdom it offers us. Adopting the habit of knowledge capture has immediate benefits for our mental health and peace of mind. We can let go of the fear that our memory will fail us at a crucial moment. Instead of jumping at every new headline and notification, we can choose to consume information that adds value to our lives and consciously let go of the rest. Organize, save for actionability. Once you've begun capturing notes with the ideas that resonate with you, you'll eventually feel the need to organize them. It is tempting to try to create a perfect hierarchy of folders up front to contain every possible note you might ever want to capture. Even if it was possible, that approach would be incredibly time-consuming and require way too much effort, pulling you away from what interests you. Today, most people tend to organize information by subject, like the Dewey Decimal System you've probably seen at the library. For example, you might find a book under a broad subject category like architecture, business, history, or geology. When it comes to digital notes, we can use much easier and lighter ways of organizing, because our priorities and goals can change at a moment's notice, and probably will. We want to avoid organizing methods that are overly rigid and prescriptive. The best way to organize your notes is to organize for action. According to the active projects you are working on right now, consider new information in terms of its utility, asking, how is this going to help me move forward? One of my current projects. Surprisingly, when you focus on taking action, the vast amount of information out there gets radically streamlined and simplified. there are relatively few things that are actionable and relevant at any given time, which means you have a clear filter for ignoring everything else. Organizing for action gives you a sense of tremendous clarity, because you know that everything you're keeping actually has a purpose. You know that it aligns with your goals and priorities. Instead of organizing being an obstacle to your productivity, it becomes a contributor to it. Distill, find the essence. Once you start capturing ideas in a central place and organizing them for action, you'll inevitably begin to notice patterns and connections between them. An article you read about gardening will give you an insight into growing your customer base. An offhand testimonial from a client will give you the idea to create a web page with all your client testimonials. A business card will remind you of a fascinating conversation you had with someone who you could reach out to for coffee. The human mind is like a sizzling hot frying pan of associations. Throw a handful of seeds in there and they'll explode into new ideas, like popcorn. Every note is the seed of an idea, reminding you of what you already know and already think about a topic. There is a powerful way to facilitate and speed up this process of rapid association. Distill your notes down to their essence. Every idea has an essence, the heart and soul of what it is trying to communicate. It might take hundreds of pages and thousands of words to fully explain a complex insight, but there is always a way to convey the core message in just a sentence or two. Einstein famously summarized his revolutionary new theory of physics with the equation E = mc². If he can distill his thinking into such an elegant equation, you can surely summarize the main points of any article, book, video, or presentation so that the main point is easy to identify. Why is it so important to be able to easily find the main point of a note? Because in the midst of a busy workday, you won't have time to review 10 pages of notes on a book you read last year. You need to be able to quickly find just the main takeaways. If you've highlighted those takeaways in the flow of the reading you were already doing anyway, you'll be able to remind yourself of what the book contains without having to spend hours rereading it. Every time you take a note, ask yourself, how can I make this as useful as possible for my future self? That question will lead you to annotate the words and phrases that explain why you saved a note, what you were thinking, and what exactly caught your attention. Your notes will be useless if you can't decipher them in the future, or if they're so long that you don't even try. Think of yourself not just as a taker of notes, but as a giver of notes. You are giving your future self the gift of knowledge that is easy to find and understand. Express, show your work. All the previous steps capturing, organizing, and distilling are geared toward one ultimate purpose: sharing your own ideas, your own story, and your own knowledge with others. What is the point of knowledge if it doesn't help anyone or produce anything? Whether your goal is to lose weight, get a promotion at work, start a side business, or strengthen your local community, personal knowledge management exists to support taking action. Anything else is a distraction. A common challenge for people who are curious and love to learn is that we can fall into the habit of continuously force-feeding ourselves more and more information, but never actually take the next step and apply it. We compile tons of research, but never put forward our own proposal. We gather untold business case studies, but never pitch one potential client. We study every piece of relationship advice available, but never ask anyone out on a date. It's so easy to endlessly delay and postpone the experiences that would so enrich our lives. We think we're not ready. We fear we're not prepared. We cannot stand the thought that there is one little piece of information we're missing, that, if we had it, would make all the difference. I'm here to tell you that that is no way to live your life. Information becomes knowledge, personal, embodied, verified only when we put it to use. You gain confidence in what you know only when you know that it works. Until you do, it's just a theory. This is why I recommend you shift as much of your time and effort as possible from consuming to creating. We all naturally have a desire to create, to bring to life something good, true, or beautiful. Point 9. It's a part of our essential nature. Creating new things is not only one of the most deeply fulfilling things we can do, it can also have a positive impact on others by inspiring, entertaining, or educating them. What should you create? It depends on your skills, interests, and personality. If you are highly analytical, you could evaluate the many options for camping gear and create a list of recommended products to share with your friends. If you like to teach, you could record your favorite dessert recipe and post it on social media or a blog. If you care about a local cause such as public parks, you could create a plan to lobby the city council for more funding. All these actions evaluate, share, teach, record, post, and lobby via synonyms for the act of expression. They all draw on outside sources for raw material. They all involve a practical process of refinement over time. And they all end up making an impact on someone or something that matters to you. Information is always in flux, and it is always a work in progress. Since nothing is ever truly final, there is no need to wait to get started. You can publish a simple website now, and slowly add additional pages over time. You can send out a draft of a piece of writing now and make revisions later when you have more time. The sooner you begin, the sooner you start on the path of improvement. I've introduced a lot of new concepts and terms, and I know at this point it can seem a little overwhelming. It may feel like you have to learn and do a lot of new things to be able to build a second brain. Here's the surprising truth. You are already doing most of the work required. You are already learning new things you couldn't stop if you wanted to. You already consume interesting ideas. Note the dozens of tabs you likely have open in your browser. You already put in so much effort to keep track of all the information you need for your studies, your job, or your business. All you need is a slightly more intentional, more deliberate way to manage that information, plus a few practical habits to ensure it gets done. In part 2, I will show you how to use the D steps to radically expand your memory, intelligence, and creativity. For each step, I'll share a set of practical techniques that you can implement today that will begin to yield benefits tomorrow. Techniques that don't require any advanced technology, only the everyday devices and apps you have in your pocket and on your desk right now. Many people who follow the D methodology continue to use paper for their notes. Many even find that they take more notes on paper once they have a way of capturing those notes digitally and saving them in a secure place. It's not black or white. It's about choosing the right tool for the job. This book is focused primarily on the potential of digital notes. Most notes apps provide ways of exporting your notes in standard formats that can then be imported into other apps. I personally have switched platforms twice, from Microsoft Word to Google Docs, and then later to Evernote, and expect to switch to new platforms regularly in the future as technology advances. In a wonderful coincidence, recent research by neurophysiologists May Britt Moser and Edvard Moser at the Norwegian University of Science and Technology indicates that the human brain remembers information using a grid code, a part of the brain involved in spatial reasoning. They speculate that the grid code could therefore be some sort of metric or coordinate system that can uniquely and efficiently represent a lot of information. The word productivity has the same origin as the Latin verb producer, which means to produce, which means that at the end of the day, if you can't point to some kind of output or result you've produced, it's questionable whether you've been productive at all. The consumerist attitude toward information, that more is better, that we never have enough, and that what we already have isn't good enough is at the heart of many people's dissatisfaction with how they spend their time online. Instead of trying to find the best content, I recommend instead switching your focus to making things, which is far more satisfying. The other synonyms for expression include publish, speak, present, perform, produce, write, draw, interpret, critique, or translate. Part 2. The Method. The 4 Steps of D. Chapter 4. Capture Keep What Resonates. Everything not saved will be lost. Nintendo quit screen message. Information is food for the brain. It's no accident that we call new ideas food for thought. It's clear that we need food and water to survive. What may not be so clear is that we also need information to live, to understand and adapt to our environment, to maintain relationships and cooperate with others, and to make wise decisions that further our interests. Information isn't a luxury, it is the very basis of our survival. Just as with the food we put into our bodies, it is our responsibility and right to choose our information diet. It's up to us to decide what information is good for us, what we want more of and less of, and ultimately, what we do with it. You're what you consume, and that applies just as much to information as to nutrition. A second brain gives us a way to filter the information stream and curate only the very best ideas we encounter in a private, trusted place. Think of it as planting your own knowledge garden, where you are free to cultivate your ideas and develop your own thinking away from the deafening noise of other people's opinions. A garden is only as good as its seeds. So we want to start by seeding our knowledge garden with only the most interesting, insightful, useful ideas we can find. You may already consume a lot of content from many different sources, but perhaps never put much thought into what you do with it afterward. Maybe you are already a diligent organizer, but you've fallen into a habit of digital hoarding that doesn't end up enriching your life. If this is all completely new to you, you may be starting at square one. No matter your situation, let's start at the very beginning, how to use the first step of T to begin building your own private collection of knowledge. Building a private collection of knowledge. Taylor Swift is an icon of modern pop and country music and one of the best-selling music artists in history. Her 9 chart-topping albums have sold over 200 million copies worldwide and earned her a long list of awards, including 11 Grammy Awards. Not only does she appear in lists of the greatest singer-songwriters of all time, her influence has transcended music and placed her on such lists as the Time 100 and Forbes Celebrity 100.1. Over the course of her career, Swift has released 5 documentary films revealing her creative songwriting process. In all of them, she can be found with her head buried in her phone. As she says, "I disappear into my phone because my phone is where I keep my notes and my phone is where I'm editing." In her notes, she can write down and reread, edit, and riff off any snippet of lyrics or melodic hook that flickers through her mind. She can take her notes everywhere, access them from anywhere, and send them within seconds to a wide network of producers and collaborators using the same device. Any feedback they send back can go right into her notes as well. In an interview about how she wrote the smash hit Blank Space, Free Swift says, "I'll be going about my daily life and I'll think, wow. So we only have 2 real options in relationships: it's going to be forever or it's going to go down in flames. So I'll jot that down in my notes. I'll come up with a line that I think is clever, like darling, I'm a nightmare dressed like a daydream, and I just pick them and put them where they fit and construct the bridge out of more lines that come up." Within the last couple of years, Blank Space was the culmination of all my best ones, one after the other. For Swift, writing songs is not a discrete activity that she can do only at certain times and in certain places. It is a side effect of the way her mind works, spinning off new metaphors and turns of phrase at the most unexpected times. I'm inspired to write songs at any time of day. When I'm going through something or when the dust has settled and I'm over it. It can be anything. I'll just be doing dishes or something, or in the middle of an interview, and I could get an idea in my head that just kind of sticks out as. That could be a hook. That could be a pre-chorus. That's a first line. She goes on to explain why it's so important to her to capture those fleeting thoughts right as they appear. I kind of have to capitalize on the excitement of me getting that idea and see it all the way through, or else I'll leave it behind and assume it wasn't good enough. Even after all her success, even Taylor Swift needs a system to carry her ideas from inception all the way to completion. By integrating her note-taking with her daily life, she's able to use language and analogies that are rooted in everyday feelings and experiences, forging a powerful connection with her fans, who call themselves Swifties. Listening to her albums is like following Swift on a journey of self-discovery, each album chronicling what she was experiencing and who she was becoming in each chapter of her life. This story sheds light on how even the world's most successful and prolific creatives need support systems to pursue their craft. It's not a matter of having enough raw talent. Talent needs to be channeled and developed in order to become something more than a momentary spark. Actor and comedian Jerry Seinfeld, arguably the most influential comedian of his generation, wrote in his book Is This Anything? "Whenever I came up with a funny bit, whether it happened on a stage, in a conversation, or working it out on my preferred canvas, the big yellow Lego pad, I kept it in one of those old-school accordion folders. A lot of people I've talked to seem surprised that I've kept all these notes. I don't understand why they think that. I don't understand why I've kept anything else. What could possibly be of more value? Think about your favorite athlete, musician, or actor. Behind the scenes of their public persona, there is a process they follow for regularly turning new ideas into creative output. The same goes for inventors, engineers, and effective leaders. Innovation and impact don't happen by accident or chance. Creativity depends on a creative process. Creating a knowledge bank. How to generate compounding interest from your thoughts. In Chapter 2, we looked at the history of commonplace books kept by intellectuals and writers in previous centuries. For them, the purpose of information was clear: to inform their writing, speaking, and conversation. Knowing how they were going to be putting ideas to use gave them a powerful lens for seeing which ones were worth the trouble of writing down. This practice continues among creatives. Today, songwriters are known for compiling hook books full of lyrics and musical riffs they may want to use in future songs. Software engineers build code libraries so useful bits of code are easy to access. Lawyers keep case files with details from past cases they might want to refer to in the future. Marketers and advertisers maintain swipe files with examples of compelling ads they might want to draw from. The challenge for the rest of us is how to apply this same lens to the work we do every day. What kinds of information are worth preserving when we don't know exactly how we'll be putting it to use? Our world changes much faster than in previous eras, and most of us don't have a single creative medium we work in. How can we decide what to save when we have no idea what the future holds? To answer that question, we have to radically expand our definition of knowledge. Knowledge isn't just wise quotations from long-dead Greek philosophers in white togas. It's not just the teachings found within thick textbooks written by academics with advanced degrees. In the digital world we live in, knowledge most often shows up as content, snippets of text, screenshots, bookmarked articles, podcasts, or other kinds of media. This includes the content you gather from outside sources, but also the content you create as you compose emails, draw up project plans, brainstorm ideas, and journal your own thoughts. These aren't just random artifacts with no value, they are knowledge assets that crystallize what you know in concrete form. Knowledge isn't always something out there that you have to go out and find. It's everywhere, all around you, buried in the emails in your inbox, hidden within files in your documents folder, and waiting on cloud drives. Knowledge capture is about mining the richness of the reading you're already doing and the life you're already living. Sometimes these assets are quite mundane, the agenda from last year's financial planning, off-site repurposed for next year's meeting. At other times, that knowledge is lofty and grandeur, in-depth notes from a book on history that could change how you think about the world, or anything in between. A knowledge asset is anything that can be used in the future to solve a problem, save time, illuminate a concept, or learn from past experience. Knowledge assets can come from either the external world or your inner thoughts. External knowledge could include highlights, insightful passages from books or articles you read, quotes, memorable passages from podcasts or audiobooks you listen to, bookmarks and favorites, links to interesting content you find on the web or favorited social media posts, voice memos, clips recorded on your mobile devices, notes to self, meeting notes, notes you take about what was discussed during meetings or phone calls, images, photos or other images that you find inspiring or interesting, takeaways, lessons from courses, conferences, or presentations you've attended. Look around you and notice that you already have many of these. It may be disorganized, spread around in different places, and saved in different formats, but it's there. Just notice that you've already spent the effort to create or acquire it. All you need to do is gather it up and plant it as the first seeds in your knowledge garden. Soon I'll show you how to do that. As you start collecting this material from the outer world, it often sparks new ideas and realizations in your inner world. You can capture those thoughts too. They could include stories, your favorite anecdotes, whether they happen to you or someone else, insights, the small and big realizations you have, memories, experiences from your life that you don't want to forget, reflections, personal thoughts and lessons written in a journal or diary, musings, random shower ideas that pop into your head. The meaning of a thought, insight, or memory often isn't immediately clear. We need to write them down, revisit them, and view them from a different perspective in order to digest what they mean to us. It is exceedingly difficult to do that within the confines of our heads. We need an external medium in which to see our ideas from another vantage point, and writing things down is the most effective and convenient one ever invented. Perhaps you have some hesitation about writing down such personal thoughts in a piece of software rather than a private journal. While it's always up to you what you choose to note down, remember that your second brain is private, too. You can share certain notes if you want to, but by default everything inside is for your eyes only. For now, choose the 2 to 3 kinds of content from the 2 lists above that you already have the most of and already value. Some people favor inner sources of knowledge. Some people are biased toward the outer world, but most people are somewhere in between. While you can eventually learn to capture from downsings of different sources, it's important to start small and get your feet wet before diving into the deep end. What not to keep? The examples I've shared may seem so expensive that you're wondering if there is anything you shouldn't keep in your second brain. In my experience, there are 4 kinds of content that aren't well suited to notes apps. Is this sensitive information you'd like to keep secure? The content you save in your notes is easily accessible from any device, which is great for accessibility but not for security. Information like tax records, government documents, passwords, and health records shouldn't be saved in your notes. Is this a special format or file type better handled by a dedicated app? Although you could save specialized files, such as Photoshop files or video footage, in your notes, you'll need a specialized app to open them anyway, so there's no benefit to keeping them in your notes. Is this a very large file? Notes apps are made for short, lightweight bits of text and images, and their performance will often be severely hampered if you try to save large files in them. Will it need to be collaboratively edited? Notes apps are perfectly suited for individual, private use, which makes them less than ideal for collaboration. You can share individual notes or even groups of notes with others. But if you need multiple people to be able to collaboratively edit a document in real time, then you'll need to use a different platform. 12 Favorite Problems. A Nobel Prize winner's approach to capturing, with the abundance of content all around us, it can be hard to know exactly what is worth preserving. I use an insightful exercise to help people make this decision easier. I call it 12 Favorite Problems, inspired by Nobel Prize-winning physicist Richard Feynman. Feynman was known for his wide-ranging, eclectic tastes. As a child, he already showed a talent for engineering, once building a functioning home alarm system out of spare parts while his parents were out running errands. During his colorful lifetime, Feynman spent time in Brazil teaching physics, learned to play the bongo and the conga drums well enough to perform with orchestras, and enthusiastically traveled around the world exploring other cultures. Of course, Feynman is best known for his groundbreaking discoveries in theoretical physics and quantum mechanics, for which he received the Nobel Prize in 1965. In his spare time, he also played a pivotal role on the commission that investigated the Challenger space shuttle disaster and published half a dozen books. How could one person make so many contributions across so many areas? How did he have the time to lead such a full and interesting life while also becoming one of the most recognized scientists of his generation? Feynman revealed his strategy in an INTERVIEW4. You have to keep a dozen of your favorite problems constantly present in your mind, although by and large they will lay in a dormant state. Every time you hear or read a new trick or a new result, test it against each of your 12 problems to see whether it helps. Every once in a while, there will be a hit, and people will say, "How did he do it? He must be a genius." In other words, Feynman's approach was to maintain a list of a dozen open questions. When a new scientific finding came out, he would test it against each of his questions to see if it shed any new light on the problem. This cross-disciplinary approach allowed him to make connections across seemingly unrelated subjects, while continuing to follow his sense of curiosity. As told in Genius, The Life and Science of Richard Feynman by James Cleek. Feynman once took inspiration for his physics from an accident at dinner. He was eating in the student cafeteria when someone tossed a dinner plate into the Era Cornell cafeteria plate with the university seal imprinted on one diamond. In the instant of its flight, he experienced what he long afterward considered an epiphany. As the plate spun, it wobbled. Because of the insignia, he could see that the spin and the wobble were not quite in synchrony. Yet just in that instant, it seemed to him, or was it his physicist's intuition, that the two rotations were related. After working the problem out on paper, Feynman discovered a 2:1 ratio between the plate's wobble and spin, a neat relationship that suggested a deeper, underlying principle at work. When a fellow physicist and mentor asked what the use of such an insight was, Feynman responded, "It doesn't have any importance. I don't care whether a thing has importance. Isn't it fun?" He was following his intuition and curiosity, but it did end up having importance, with his research into the equations underlying rotation informing the work that ultimately led to him receiving the Nobel Prize. Feynman's approach encouraged him to follow his interests wherever they might lead. He posed questions and constantly scanned for solutions to long-standing problems in his reading, conversations, and everyday life. When he found one, he could make a connection that looked to others like a flash of unparalleled brilliance. Ask yourself, what are the questions I've always been interested in? This could include grand, sweeping questions like how can we make society fairer and more equitable, as well as practical ones like how can I make it a habit to exercise every day. It might include questions about relationships, such as how can I have closer relationships with the people I love, or productivity, like how can I spend more of my time doing high-value work. Here are more examples of favorite problems from my students. How do I live less in the past and more in the present? How do I build an investment strategy that is aligned with my midterm and long-term goals and commitments? What does it look like to move from mindless consumption to mindful creation? How can I go to bed early instead of watching shows after the kids go to bed? How can my industry become more ecologically sustainable while remaining profitable? How can I work through the fear I have of taking on more responsibility? How can my school provide more resources for students with special needs? How do I start reading all the books I already have instead of buying more? How can I speed up and relax at the same time? How can we make the healthcare system more responsive to people's needs? What can I do to make eating healthy easier? How can I make decisions with more confidence? Notice that some of these questions are abstract, while others are concrete. Some express deep longings, while others are more like spontaneous interests. Many are questions about how to live a better life, while if you are focused on how to succeed professionally, the key to this exercise is to make them open-ended questions that don't necessarily have a single answer. To find questions that invoke a state of wonder and curiosity about the amazing world we live in. The power of your favorite problems is that they tend to stay fairly consistent over time. The exact framing of each question may change, but even as we move between projects, jobs, relationships, and careers, our favorite problems tend to follow us across the years. I recommend asking your family or childhood friends what you were obsessed with as a kid. Those very same interests probably still fire your imagination as an adult, which means any content you collect related to them will likely be relevant far into the future as well. As a kid, I had a passion for Legos, the modular toy blocks beloved by generations of children. My parents noticed that I didn't play with Legos like other kids. Instead, I spent my time organizing and reorganizing the pieces. I remember being completely captivated by the problem of how to create order out of the chaos of thousands of pieces of every shape and size. I would invent new organizational schemes by color, by size, by theme. As I became obsessed with the idea that if I could just find the right system, I would finally be able to build my magnum opus, a Lego spaceship like the ones I saw in the sci-fi movies I loved. That very same question, how can creativity emerge out of chaos, still drives me to this day. Only now, it's in the form of organizing digital information instead of Legos. Pursuing this question has taught me so many things over the years. Across many seasons of my life, the goal isn't to definitively answer the question once and for all, but to use the question as a North Star for my learning. Take a moment now to write down some of your own favorite problems. Here are my recommendations to guide you. Ask people close to you what you were obsessed with as a child. Often you'll continue to be fascinated with the same things as an adult. Don't worry about coming up with exactly 12. The exact number doesn't matter, but try to come up with at least a few. Don't worry about getting the list perfect. This is just a first pass, and it will always be evolving. Phrase them as open-ended questions that could have multiple answers, in contrast to yes divided by no questions with only one answer. Use your list of favorite problems to make decisions about what to capture, anything potentially relevant to answering them. Use one of the capture tools I recommend later in this chapter, or in the Second Brain Resource Guide at Building a Second Brain. Come divided by resources. Capture criteria. How to avoid keeping too much or too little. Once you have identified the kinds of questions you want your second brain to answer, it's time to choose specifically which pieces of information will be most useful. Imagine you come across a blog post during your web browsing that details how a marketing expert you respect runs her campaigns. You're hooked. This is the kind of material you've been looking for. Finally, the master reveals her secrets. Your first instinct might be to save the article in its entirety. It's high-quality information. so why not preserve all of it? The problem is, it's an in-depth how-to article that is thousands of words long. Even if you spend the 20 or 30 minutes it would take to consume it now, in the future you'll just have to spend all that time reading it again, since you'll have forgotten most of the details. You also don't want to just bookmark the link and save it to read later, because then you won't know what it contains in the first place. This is where most people get stuck. They either dive straight into the first piece of content they see, read it voraciously, but quickly forget all the details, or they open down scenes of tabs in their web browser and feel a pang of guilt at all those interesting resources they haven't been able to get to. There is a way out of this situation. It starts with realizing that in any piece of content, the value is not evenly distributed. There are always certain parts that are especially interesting, helpful, or valuable to you. When you realize this, the answer is obvious. You can extract only the most salient, relevant, rich material and save it as a succinct note. Don't save entire chapters of a book. Save only select passages. Don't save complete transcripts of interviews. Save a few of the best quotes. Don't save entire websites. Save a few screenshots of the sections that are most interesting. The best curators are picky about what they allow into their collections, and you should be too. With a Notes app, you can always save links back to the original content if you need to review your sources or want to dive deeper into the details in the future. The biggest pitfall I see people falling into once they begin capturing digital notes is saving too much. If you try to save every piece of material you come across, you run the risk of inundating your future self with tons of irrelevant information. At that point, your second brain will be no better than scrolling through social media. This is why it's so important to take on a curator's perspective, that we are the judges, editors, and interpreters of the information we choose to let into our lives. Thinking like a curator means taking charge of your own information stream, instead of just letting it wash over you. The more economical you can be with the material you capture in the first place, the less time and effort your future self will have to spend organizing, distilling, and expressing it. Here are 4 criteria I suggest to help you decide exactly which nuggets of knowledge are worth keeping. Capture criteria 1. Does it inspire me? Inspiration is one of the most rare and precious experiences in life. It is the essential fuel for doing your best work. Yet it's impossible to call up inspiration on demand. You can Google the answer to a question, but you can't Google a feeling. There is a way to evoke a sense of inspiration more regularly. Keep a collection of inspiring quotes, photos, ideas, and stories. Anytime you need a break, a new perspective, or a dash of motivation, you can look through it and see what sparks your imagination. For example, I keep a folder full of customer testimonials I've received over the years. Anytime I think what I'm doing doesn't matter or isn't good enough, all I have to do is open up that folder and my perspective is completely shifted. Capture criteria 2. Is it useful? Carpenters are known for keeping odds and ends in a corner of their workshop. A variety of nails and washers, scraps of lumber cut off from larger planks, and random bits of metal and wood. It costs nothing to keep these offcuts around, and surprisingly often they end up being the crucial missing piece in a future project. Sometimes you come across a piece of information that isn't necessarily inspiring, but you know it might come in handy in the future. A statistic, a reference, a research finding, or a helpful diagram. These are the equivalents of the spare parts a carpenter might keep around their workshop. For example, I keep a folder full of stock photos, graphics, and drawings I find both online and offline. Anytime I need an image for a slide deck or a web page, or to spark new ideas, I have a plentiful supply of imagery I've already found compelling, ready and waiting. Capture criteria 3. Is it personal? One of the most valuable kinds of information to keep is personal information, your own thoughts, reflections, memories, and mementos. Like the age-old practice of journaling or keeping a diary, we can use note-taking to document our lives and better understand how we became who we are. No one else has access to the wisdom you've personally gained from a lifetime of conversations, mistakes, victories, and lessons learned. No one else values the small moments of your days quite like you do. I often save screenshots of text messages sent between my family and friends. The small moments of warmth and humor that take place in these threads are precious to me, since I can't always be with them in person. It takes mere moments, And I love knowing that I'll forever have memories from my conversations with the people closest to me. Capture criteria 4. Is it surprising? I've often noticed that many of the notes people take are of ideas they already know, already agree with, or could have guessed. We have a natural bias as humans to seek evidence that confirms what we already believe. A well-studied phenomenon known as confirmation bias.
Yeah.
That isn't what a second brain is for. The renowned information theorist Claude Shannon, whose discoveries paved the way for modern technology, had a simple definition for information: that which surprises you. 7. If you're not surprised, then you already knew it at some level. So why take note of it? Surprise is an excellent barometer for information that doesn't fit neatly into our existing understanding, which means it has the potential to change how we think. Sometimes you come across an idea that is neither inspiring, personal, nor obviously useful, but there is something surprising about it. You may not be able to put your finger on why, but it conflicts with your existing point of view in a way that makes your brain perk up and pay attention. Those are the ideas you should capture. Your second brain shouldn't be just another way of confirming what you already know. We are already surrounded by algorithms that feed you as only what we already believe and social networks that continually reinforce what we already think. Our ability to capture ideas from anywhere takes you as in a different direction. By saving ideas that may contradict each other and don't necessarily support what we already believe, we can train ourselves to taking information from different sources instead of immediately jumping to conclusions. By playing with ideas, bending and stretching and remishing them become less attached to the way they were originally presented and can or certain aspects or elements to use in our own work. If what you're capturing doesn't change your mind, then what's the point? Ultimately, capture what resonates. I've given you specific criteria to help you decide what is worth capturing. But if you take away one thing from this chapter, it should be to keep what resonates. Here's why. Making decisions analytically with a checklist is taxing and stressful. It is the kind of thinking that demands the most energy. When you use up too much energy taking notes, you have little left over for the subsequent steps that add far more value. Making connections, imagining possibilities, formulating theories, and creating new ideas of your own. Not to mention, if you make reading and learning into unpleasant experiences, over time you're going to find yourself doing less and less of them. The secret to making reading a habit is to make it effortless and enjoyable. As you consume a piece of content, listen for an internal feeling of being moved or surprised by the idea you're taking in. This special feeling of resonance, like an echo in your soul, is your intuition telling you that something is literally noteworthy. You don't need to figure out exactly why it resonates. Just look for the signs. Your eyes might widen slightly, your heart may skip a beat, your throat may go slightly dry, and your sense of time might subtly slow down as the world around you fades away. These are clues that it's time to hit save. We know from neuroscientific research that emotions organize rather than disrupt rational thinking. When something resonates with us, it is our emotion-based, intuitive mind telling us it is interesting before our logical mind can explain why. I often find that a piece of content resonates with me in ways I can't fully explain in the moment, and its true potential only becomes clear later on. There's scientific evidence that our intuition knows what it's doing. From the book Designing for Behavior Change, participants in a famous study were given 4 biased decks of cards, some that would win them money and some that would cause them to lose. When they started the game, they didn't know that the decks were biased. As they played the game, people's bodies started showing signs of physical stress when their conscious minds were about to use a money-losing deck. The stress was an automatic response that occurred because the intuitive mind realized something was wrong long before the conscious mind realized anything was amiss. The author's conclusion: our intuitive mind learns and responds even without our conscious awareness. If you ignore that inner voice of intuition, over time it will slowly quiet down and fade away. If you practice listening to what it is telling you, the inner voice will grow stronger. You'll start to hear it in all kinds of situations. It will guide you in what choices to make and which opportunities to pursue. It will warn you away from people and situations that aren't right for you. It will speak up and take a stand for your convictions even when you're afraid. I can't think of anything more important for your creative life and your life in general than learning to listen to the voice of intuition inside. It is the source of your imagination, your confidence, and your spontaneity. You can intentionally train yourself to hear that voice of intuition every day by taking note of what it tells you. Besides capturing what personally resonates with you, there are a couple other kinds of details that are generally useful to saving your notes. It's a good idea to capture key information about the source of a note, such as the original web page address, the title of the piece, the author or publisher, and the date it was published. Many capture tools are even able to identify and save this information automatically. Also, it's often helpful to capture chapter titles, headings, and bullet point lists, since they add structure to your notes and represent distillation already performed by the author on your behalf. Being your note-taking app, choosing capture tools. Now that you know what kinds of material to save in your second brain, it's time to get into the nitty-gritty. How does capturing work exactly? Let's say while reading that in-depth marketing article, you decide a specific piece of advice is highly relevant to your own plans. Most note-taking apps introduced in Chapter 2 and covered in detail in the Second Brain resource guide at Building the Second Brain come divided by resources have built-in features that allow you to capture excerpts from outside sources, and you can always simply cut and paste text directly into a new note. There is also an array of more specialized capture tools that are designed to make capturing content in digital form easy and even fun. The most common options include ebook apps, which often allow you to export your highlights or annotations all at once. Read later apps that allow you to bookmark content you find online for later reading, or in the case of podcasts or videos, listening or watching. Basic notes apps that often come pre-installed on mobile devices and are designed for easily capturing short snippets of text. Social media apps, which usually allow you to favorite content and export it to a notes app. Web clippers, which allow you to save parts of web pages, often included as a built-in feature of notes apps. Audio divided by voice transcription apps that create text transcripts from spoken words. Other third-party services, integrations, and plug-ins that automate the process of exporting content from one app to another. Some of these tools are free, and others charge a small fee. Some are completely automatic, working silently in the background, for example, to automatically sync your ebook highlights with a notes app, while others require a bit of manual effort, such as taking photos of paper notebooks to save them digitally. But in any case, the act of capture takes only moments to hit share, export, or save, and voila! You've preserved the best parts of whatever you're consuming in your second brain. Make no mistake, you will continue to use many kinds of software to manage information such as computer folders, cloud storage drives, and various platforms for sharing and collaborating on documents. Think of your capture tools as your extended nervous system, reaching out into the world to allow you to sense your surroundings. No matter how many different kinds of software you use, don't leave all the knowledge they contain scattered across dozens of places you'll never think to look. Make sure your best findings get routed back to your notes app, where you can put them all together and act on them. Here are some of the most popular ways of using capture tools to save content you come across. Capturing passages from ebooks. Most ebook apps make it very easy to highlight passages as you read. On Amazon Kindle, you can simply drag your finger across a sentence or paragraph you like to add a highlight. Then use the share menu to export all your highlights from the entire book all at once, straight to your digital notes. You can also add comments right alongside the text as you read, which will help you remember what you found interesting about a passage. Capturing excerpts from online articles or web pages. When you come across an online article or blog post you want to read, save it to a Read Later app, which is like a digital magazine rack of everything you want to read or watch or listen to at some point. Whenever you have some free time, such as on breaks or in the evening after work, scroll through the articles you've saved and pick one to read. You can make highlights just as with ebooks, and they can also be automatically exported to your notes app using a third-party platform. Capturing quotes from podcasts. Many podcast player apps allow you to bookmark or clip segments of episodes as you're listening to them. Some of them will even transcribe the audio into text, so you can export and search it within your notes. Capturing voice memos. Use a voice memo app that allows you to press a button, speak directly into your smartphone, and have every word transcribed into text and exported to your notes. Capturing parts of YouTube videos. This is a little-known feature, but almost every YouTube video is accompanied by an automatically generated transcript. Just click the Open Transcript button, and a window will open. From there, you can copy and paste excerpts to your notes, capturing excerpts from emails. Most popular notes apps include a feature that allows you to forward any email to a special address, and the full text of that email, including any attachments, will be added to your notes. Capturing content from other apps. You might edit photos in a Photos app, or make sketches in a Drawing app, or like posts in a social media app. As long as that app has a share button or allows for copy and paste, you can save whatever you've created directly to your notes for safekeeping. The surprising benefits of externalizing our thoughts. Often ideas occur to us at the most random times during our commute, while watching TV, when we're playing with our kids, or in the shower. Your second brain gives you a place to corral the jumble of thoughts tumbling through your head and park them in a waiting area for safekeeping. Not only does this allow you to preserve them for the long term, there are multiple other profound benefits that come from the simple act of writing something down. First, you are much more likely to remember information you've written down in your own words, known as the generation effect. 10 researchers have found that when people actively generate a series of words, such as by speaking or writing, more parts of their brain are activated when compared to simply reading the same words. Writing things down is a way of rehearsing those ideas, like practicing a dance routine or shooting hopes, which makes them far more likely to stick. Enhancing our memory is just the beginning. When you express an idea in writing, it's not just a matter of transferring the exact contents of your mind into paper or digital form. Writing creates new knowledge that wasn't there before. Each word you write triggers mental cascades and internal associations, leading to further ideas, all of which can come tumbling out onto the page or screen. The thinking doesn't just produce writing. Writing also enriches thinking. There is even significant evidence that expressing our thoughts in writing can lead to benefits for our health and well-being. 11. One of the most cited psychology papers of the 1990s found that translating emotional events into words leads to profound social, psychological, and neural changes. In a wide range of controlled studies, writing about one's inner experiences led to a drop in visits to the doctor, improved immune systems, and reductions in distress. Students who wrote about emotional topics showed improvements in their grades. Professionals who had been laid off found new jobs more quickly, and staff members were absent from work at lower rates. The most amazing thing about these findings is that they didn't rely on input from others. No one had to read or respond to what these people wrote down. The benefits came just from the act of writing. Perhaps the most immediate benefit of capturing content outside our heads is that we escape what I call the reactivity loop, the hamster wheel of urgency, outrage, and sensationalism that characterizes so much of the internet. The moment you first encounter an idea is the worst time to decide what it means. You need to set it aside and gain some objectivity, with a second brain as a shield against the media storm. We no longer have to react to each idea immediately, or risk losing it forever. We can set things aside and get to them later when we are calmer and more grounded. We can take our time slowly absorbing new information and integrating it into our thinking, free of the pressing demands of the moment. I'm always amazed that when I revisit the items I've previously saved to read later, many of them that seemed so important at the time are clearly trivial and unneeded. Note-taking is the easiest and simplest way of externalizing our thinking. It requires no special skill, is private by default, and can be performed anytime and anywhere. Once our thoughts are outside our head, we can examine them, play with them, and make them better. It's like a shortcut to realizing the full potential of the thoughts flowing through our minds. Your turn. What would this look like if it was easy? I've introduced a lot of ideas in this chapter, and I know it's a lot to absorb. There are so many ways to capture knowledge, but when you're just getting started, all those options can just feel overwhelming. I want to give you an open question that will help guide you as you embark on this journey. What would capturing ideas look like if it was easy? Think about what you would want to capture more of or less of. How would that feel? What kinds of content are already familiar enough that it would be easy to begin saving them now? What would capturing look like today or this week? On average, I capture just 2 notes per day. What are 2 ideas, insights, observations, perspectives, or lessons you've encountered today that you could write down right now? It's important to keep capturing relatively effortless because it is only the first step. You need to do it enough that it becomes second nature, while conserving your time and energy for the later steps when the value of the ideas you've found can be fully unleashed. Capture isn't about doing more. It's about taking notes on the experiences you're already having. It's about squeezing more juice out of the fruit of life, savoring every moment to the fullest by paying closer attention to the details. Don't worry about whether you're capturing correctly. There's no right way to do this, and therefore no wrong way. The only way to know whether you're getting the good stuff is to try putting it to use in real life. We'll get to that soon, but in the meantime, try out a couple of digital notes apps and capture tools to see which ones fit your style. Don't forget the resource guide I've put together to help you make your choice. If at any point you feel stuck or overwhelmed, step back and remember that nothing is permanent in the digital world. Digital content is endlessly malleable, so you don't have to commit to any decision forever. While every step of D complements the others, you can also use them one at a time. Start with the parts that resonate with you and expand from there as your confidence grows. In the next chapter, I'll tell you what to do with the knowledge assets you've gathered in your second brain. MIT economist Khazar Hidalgo in his book, Why Information Grows, describes how physical products, which he calls crystals of imagination, allow us to turn what we know into concrete objects that other people can access. Crystallizing our thoughts into tangible and digital objects is what allows us to share our thoughts with others and elsewhere. Our ability to crystallize imagination gives us access to the practical uses of the knowledge and know-how residing in the nervous systems of other people. If you're looking for a more precise answer of how much content to capture in your notes, I recommend no more than 10% of the original source. At most, any more than that, and it will be too difficult to wade through all the material in the future. Conveniently, 10% also happens to be the limit that most ebooks allow you to export as highlights. Even if the original web page disappears, you can often use this information to locate an archived version using the Wayback Machine, a project of the Internet Archive that preserves a record of websites.
HTTPs archive.web.
The software landscape is constantly changing, so I've created a resource guide with my continually updated recommendations of the best capture tools, both free and paid, and for a variety of devices and operating systems. You can find it at Building a Second Brain. Resources. This is called detachment gain. As explained in The Detachment Gain, The Advantage of Thinking Out Loud by Daniel Reisberg, and refers to the functional advantage to putting thoughts into externalized forms, such as speaking or writing, leading to the possibility of new discoveries that might not have been obtained in any other fashion. If you've ever had to write out a word to remember how it's spelled, you've experienced this. Chapter 5. Organize yourself for actionability. Be regular and orderly in your life so that you may be violent and original in your work. Gustave Flaubert, French novelist. Twyla Tharp is one of the most celebrated, inventive dance choreographers in modern times. Her body of work is made up of more than 160 pieces, including 129 dances, 12 television specials, 6 major Hollywood movies, 4 full-length ballets, 4 Broadway shows, and 2 figure skating routines. Dance might seem like the creative medium that could least benefit from organizing. It is performed live each time, using primarily the dancer's own bodies, and often seems improvisational and spontaneous. Yet in her book The Creative Habit, Tharp revealed that a simple organizing technique lies at the heart of a creative process that has propelled her through an incredibly prolific 6-decade career. Tharp calls her approach the box. Every time she begins a new project, she takes out a foldable file box and labels it with the name of the project, usually the name of the dance she is choreographing. This initial act gives her a sense of purpose. As she begins, the box makes me feel organized, that I have my act together even when I don't know where I'm going yet. It also represents a commitment. The simple act of writing a project name on the box means I've started work. Into the box she puts anything and everything related to the project, like a swirling cauldron of creative energy. Anytime she finds a new piece of material, such as notebooks, news clippings, CDs, videotapes of me working alone in my studio, videos of the dancers rehearsing, books and photographs and pieces of art that may have inspired me, she always knows where to put it. It all goes into the box. which means that anytime she works on that project, she knows exactly where to look in the box. In her book, Tharp tells the story of a specific project where the box proved invaluable. A collaboration with the pop rock icon Billy Joel to turn a collection of his songs into a full-length dance performance. It was a bold idea, somewhere between a concert and a musical, but quite distinct from either one. It wasn't clear how the characters in different songs, who weren't written as part of the same story, could be combined into the same narrative. Even a project as open-ended as this one started the same way as all the others, with her goals. I believe in starting each project with a stated goal. Sometimes the goal is nothing more than a personal mantra such as keep it simply, or something perfect or economy to remind me of what I was thinking at the beginning. If and when I lose my way, I write it down on a slip of paper and it as the first thing that goes into the box. For the collaboration with Joel, Tharp had two goals. The first was to understand and master the role of narrative in dance, a long-standing creative challenge that had captured her curiosity. The second goal was much more practical, but no less motivating, to pay her dancers well, she said. So I wrote my goals for the project to a story and mock a dance pay onto blue index cards and watch them flow to the bottom of the Joel box. They sit there as I write this, covered by months of research, like an anchor keeping me connected to my original impulse. After that, every bit of research and every idea potentially relevant to the project went into Tharp as box. Recordings of Billy Joel's music videos, live performances, lectures, photographs, news clippings, song lists, and notes about those songs. She gathered news footage and movies about the Vietnam War, important books from the era, and even material from other boxes, including research from an abandoned project that never made it onto the stage. The artifacts that Tharp collected weren't just for her own use. They became sparks of inspiration for her team. A pair of earrings and a macrame vest shared with the costume designer. Books about psychedelic light events to inspire the lighting designer. Photographs from other shows and Joel's childhood home in Long Island to discuss with the production designer. All this creative raw material eventually filled 12 boxes. But all the collecting and gathering from the outside world doesn't mean that Tharp didn't add her own creativity. For example, she found an elaborate set of notes from an early song of Joel's called She's Got a Way, which was full of innocence and sweetness. She decided to change its meaning. In my notes you can see the song morphing into something harsher, eventually becoming two simultaneous sleazy bar scenes, one in Vietnam, the other back home. I felt obliged to run this by Billy, warning him, this is going to destroy the song. He wasn't worried. Go for it, he said. Twyla Tharp's box gave her several powerful advantages as she set out on her creative journey. The box gave her the security to venture out and take risks. A box is like soil to me. It's basic, earthy, elemental. It's home. It's what I can always go back to when I need to regroup and keep my bearings. Knowing that the box is always there gives me the freedom to venture out, be bold, dare to fall flat on my face. The box gave Tharp a way to put projects on hold and revisit them later. The box makes me feel connected to a project. I feel this even when I've backburnered a project. I may have put the box away on a shelf, but I know it's there. The project name on the box in bold black lettering is a constant reminder that I had an idea once and may come back to it very soon. Finally, it gave her a way to look back on her past victories. There's one final benefit to the box. It gives you a chance to look back. A lot of people don't appreciate this. When they're done with a project, they're relieved. They're ready for a break and then they want to move forward to the next idea. The box gives you the opportunity to reflect on your performance. Dig down through the boxes archaeologically, and you'll see a project's beginnings. This can be instructive. How did you do? Did you get to your goal? Did you improve on it? Did it change along the way? Could you have done it all more efficiently? Twyla Tharp's box reveals the true value of a simple container. It is easy to use, easy to understand, easy to create, and easy to maintain. It can be moved from place to place without losing its contents. A container requires no effort to identify, to share with others, and to put in storage when it's no longer needed. We don't need complex, sophisticated systems to be able to produce complex, sophisticated works. The cathedral effect, designing a space for your ideas. Consider how much time we spend designing and arranging our physical environment. We buy nice furniture, deliberate for weeks over the color of our walls. and fiddle with the placement of plants and books. We know that the details of lighting, temperature, and the layout of a space dramatically affect how we feel and think. There's a name for this phenomenon. The cathedral effect. Point to studies have shown that the environment we find ourselves in powerfully shapes our thinking. When we are in a space with high ceilings, for example, think of the lofty architecture of classic churches invoking the grandeur of heaven, we tend to think in more abstract ways. When we're in a room with low ceilings, such as a small workshop, we're more likely to think concretely. No one questions the importance of having physical spaces that make you feel calm and centered. But when it comes to your digital workspace, it's likely you've spent little time, if any, arranging that space to enhance your productivity or creativity. As knowledge workers, we spend many hours every day within digital environments or computers, smartphones, and the web. Unless you take control of those virtual spaces and shape them to support the kinds of thinking you want to do, every minute spent there will feel taxing and distracting. Your second brain isn't just a tool, it's an environment. It is a garden of knowledge full of familiar, waiting pathways, but also secret and secluded corners. Every pathway is a jumping-off point to new ideas and perspectives. Gardens are natural, but they don't happen by accident. They require a caretaker to seed the plants, trim the weeds, and shape the paths wading through them. It's time for us to put more intention into the digital environments where we now spend so many of our waking hours. Once you've created this environment, you'll know where to go when it's time to execute or create. You won't have to sit down and spend half an hour painstakingly gathering together all the materials you need to get started. Your second brain is like a mind cathedral that you can step into any time you want to shut out the world and imagine a world of your own. The next step in building your second brain is to take the morsels of insight you've begun to capture and organize them in a space where you can do your best thinking. Organizing for action, where 99% of note-takers get stuck, and how to solve it. As you begin to capture your ideas in a consistent way, you are likely to experience a new sense of excitement about the information flowing all around you. You'll start to pay closer attention to the books you read, the conversations you have, and the interviews you listen to, knowing that any interesting idea you encounter can be reliably saved and utilized. You no longer have to hope that you remember your best ideas. You can ensure that you will soon. However, you'll run head-on into a new problem: what to do with all this valuable material you've gathered. The more diligently you collect it, the bigger this problem will be. Capturing notes without an effective way to organize and retrieve them only leads to more overwhelm. I spent years trying different ways of solving the problem of how to organize my digital life. I tried techniques borrowed from organizing physical spaces, every kind of specially formatted notebook, and even the Dewey Decimal System used in libraries. I tried organizing my files by date, by subject, by kind, and countless other elaborate schemes, but every method I tried soon failed. The problem was that none of these systems was integrated into my daily life. They always require me to follow a series of elaborate rules that took time away from my other priorities, which meant they would quickly become outdated and obsolete. Every time I fell off the organizing wagon, I reverted to dropping all my notes and files into a folder for whichever project I was currently focused on. This ensured that at least I had exactly what I needed for my current work immediately on hand. No tagging, filing, or keywords needed. Then one day I had a realization. Why didn't I just organize my files that way all the time? If organizing by project was the most natural way to manage information with minimal effort, why not make it the default? That is what I did, and to my surprise, it worked. Over time, I refined, simplified, and tested this action-based approach with thousands of students and followers. I eventually named this organizing system PARA, which stands for the four main categories of information in our lives: projects, areas, resources, and archives. These four categories are universal, encompassing any kind of information, from any source, in any format, for any purpose. PARA can handle it all, regardless of your profession or field. For one reason, it organizes information based on how actionable it is, not what kind of information it is. The project becomes the main unit of organization for your digital files. Instead of having to sort your notes according to a complex hierarchy of topics and subtopics, you have to answer only one simple question: in which project will this be most useful? It assumes only that you are currently working on a certain set of projects. and that your information should be organized to support them. For example, say you come across a useful article on how to become more resilient and capture it in your notes. You're sure that this information will come in handy one day, but how do you know where to put those notes in the meantime? How will you remember where to look the next time you need them? This can quickly become an anxiety-provoking decision because of the risk of making the wrong choice. Most people would save this note by subject in a folder called Psychology. That seems like a perfectly logical choice. Here's the problem. The subject of psychology is far too broad to be useful. Imagine your future self a few weeks or months from now, in the middle of your workday. How much time will you have to search through all your notes on such a broad subject? There might be notes from many dozens of articles, books, and other resources in there, much of which won't be actionable at all. It would take hours just to figure out what you have. There's another way. I will show you how to take the notes you captured and save them according to a practical use case. By taking that small extra step of putting a note into a folder or tagging issue for a specific project, such as a psychology paper you're writing or a presentation you're preparing, you'll encounter that idea right at the moment it's most relevant, not a moment before and not a moment after. If there isn't a current project that your note would be useful for, we have a couple of other options of where to put it, including dedicated places for each of the main areas of your life that you are responsible for, and resources, which is like a personal library of references, facts, and inspiration. Over time, as you complete your projects, master new skills, and progress toward your goals, you'll discover that some notes and resources are no longer actionable. I'll show you how to move them to your archives to keep them out of sight but within easy reach. These 4 categorized projects, areas, resources, and archives make up the 4 categories of Para. We'll explore each of them soon. Instead of requiring tons of time meticulously organizing your digital world, Para guides you in quickly sorting your ideas according to what really matters, your goals. One of the biggest temptations with organizing is to get too perfectionistic, treating the process of organizing as an end in itself. There is something inherently satisfying about order, and it's easy to stop there instead of going on to develop and share our knowledge. We need to always be wary of accumulating so much information that we spend all our time managing it, instead of putting it to using the outside world, instead of inventing a completely different organizational scheme for every place you store information, which creates a tremendous amount of friction navigating the inconsistencies between them. Para can be used everywhere. Across any software program, platform, or note-taking tool, you can use the same system with the same categories and the same principles across your digital life. You'll always need to use multiple platforms to move your projects forward. No single platform can do everything. The intention here is not to use a single software program, but to use a single organizing system, one that provides consistency even as you switch between apps many times per day. A project will be the same project whether it's found in your Notes app, your computer file system, or your cloud storage drive, allowing you to move seamlessly between them without losing your train of thought. By structuring your notes and files around the completion of your active projects, your knowledge can go to work for you, instead of collecting dust like an idea graveyard. The promise of Para is that it changes getting organized from a Herculean, never-ending endeavor into a straightforward task to get over with so you can move on to more important work. How Para works: priming your mind and notes for action. With the Para system, every piece of information you want to save can be placed into one of just 4 categories: projects, short-term efforts in your work or life that you're working on now; areas, long-term responsibilities you want to manage over time; resources, topics or interests that may be useful in the future; archives, inactive items from the other 3 categories; projects, what I'm working on right now. Projects include the short-term outcomes you're actively working toward right now. Projects have a couple of features that make them an ideal way to organize modern work. First, they have a beginning and an end. They take place during a specific period of time and then they finish. Second, they have a specific, clear outcome that needs to happen in order for them to be checked off as complete, such as finalize, green light, launch, or publish. A project-centric way of working comes naturally in the creative and performing arts. Artists have paintings, dancers have dances, musicians have songs, and poets have poems. These are clearly identifiable, discrete chunks of work. This project-centric approach is increasingly finding its way into all knowledge work, a trend named the Hollywood model after the way films are made. As an article in the New York Times 3 explains, a project is identified, a team is assembled. It works together for precisely as long as is needed to complete the task. Then the team disbands. The Hollywood model is now used to build bridges, design apps, or start restaurants. It is becoming more and more common for all of us to work across teams, departments, and even different companies to execute collaborative projects. And then once it's over, each go our own way. Examples of projects could include projects at work, complete web page design, create slide deck for conference, develop project schedule, plan recruitment drive, personal projects, finish Spanish language course, plan vacation, buy new living room furniture, find local volunteer opportunity, side projects, publish blog post, launch crowdfunding campaign, research best podcast microphone, complete online course. If you are not already framing your work in terms of specific, concrete projects, making this shift will give you a powerful jumpstart to your productivity. Whether you are self-employed, at a large corporation, or somewhere in between, we are all moving toward a world of project-based work. Knowing which projects you're currently committed to is crucial to being able to prioritize your week, plan your progress, and say no to things that aren't important. Areas what I'm committed to over time. As important as projects are, not everything is a project. For example, the area of our lives called finances doesn't have a definite end date. It's something that we will have to think about and manage in one way or another for as long as we live. It doesn't have a final objective. Even if you win the lottery, you'll still have finances to manage, and it will probably require a lot more attention. In our work lives, we have various ongoing areas we're responsible for, such as product development, quality control, or human resources. These are the job responsibilities that we were hired to take on. Sometimes there are others that we officially or unofficially have taken ownership of over time. Each of these is an example of an area of responsibility, and together they make up the second main category of terra. All these areas, both personal and professional, require certain information to be handled effectively, but they're not the same as projects. In the case of finances, you may have notes from calls with your financial advisors, receipts or invoices for business purchases, and your monthly household budget, among many other kinds of information. You might also have more speculative information to manage, like financial projections, research on personal finance software, and data on investment trends you're keeping an eye on. For a work-related area, like product development, you might need to save product specifications, RD findings, notes from customer research interviews, and customer satisfaction ratings. You could also have photos of products you admire to use as design inspiration, manufacturing blueprints, or color palettes. It all depends on your relationship to that area of your life and how you want to manage it or move it forward. Examples of areas from your personal life could include activities or places you are responsible for, home, apartment, cooking, travel, car, people you are responsible for or accountable to, friends, kids, spouse, pets, standards of performance you are responsible for, health, personal growth, friendships, finances, in your job or business, departments or functions you are responsible for, account management, marketing, operations, product development, people or teams you are responsible for or accountable to, direct reports, manager, board of directors, suppliers, standards of performance you are responsible for, professional development, sales and marketing, relationships and networking, recruiting and hiring. Even though areas have no final outcome, it is still important to manage them. In fact, if you look at the list above, these areas are critical to your health, happiness, security, and life satisfaction. While there is no goal to reach, there is a standard that you want to uphold in each of these areas. For finances, that standard may be that you always pay your bills on time and provide for your family's basic needs. For health, it may be that you exercise a certain number of times per week and keep your cholesterol below a certain number. For family, it may be that you spend quality time with them every evening and on the weekend. Only you can decide what those standards are. For our purposes, it helps tremendously to have a place dedicated to each of them. That way you always have somewhere to put any thought, reflection, idea, or useful tidbit of information relevant to each important aspect of your life. Resources, things I want to reference in the future. The third category of information that we want to keep is resources. This is basically a catch-all for anything that doesn't belong to a project or an area and could include any topic you're interested in gathering information about. For example, what topics are you interested in? Architecture, interior design, English literature, beer brewing. What subjects are you researching? Habit formation, note-taking, project management, nutrition. What useful information do you want to be able to reference? Vacation itineraries, life goals, stock photos, product testimonials. Which hobbies or passions do you have? Coffee, classic movies, hip-hop music, Japanese anime. Any one of these subjects could become its own resource folder. You can also think of them as research or reference materials. They are trends you are keeping track of, ideas related to your job or industry, hobbies and side interests, and things you're merely curious about. These folders are like the class notebooks you probably kept in school. One for biology, another for history, another for math. Any note or file that isn't relevant or actionable for a current project or area can be placed into resources for future reference. Archives, things I've completed or put on hold. Finally, we have our archives. This includes any item from the previous three categories that is no longer active. For example, projects that are completed or cancelled. Areas of responsibility that you are no longer committed to maintaining, such as when a relationship ends or after moving out of your apartment. Resources that are no longer relevant. Hobbies you lose interest in or subjects you no longer care about. The archives are an important part of Para because they allow you to place a folder in cold storage so that it doesn't clutter your workspace, while safekeeping it forever just in case you need it. Unlike with your house or garage, there is no penalty for keeping digital stuff forever, as long as it doesn't distract from your day-to-day focus. If you need access to that information in the future, for example, if you take on a project similar to one you previously completed, you can call it up within seconds. What Para looks like, a behind-the-scenes snapshot. Para is a universal system of organization designed to work across your digital world. It doesn't work in only one place, requiring you to use completely different organizing schemes in each of the dozens of places you keep things. It can and should be used everywhere, such as the Documents folder on your computer, your cloud storage drives, and of course, your digital notes app. Let me show you what it looks like. Here's an example of what the folders in my Notes app looked like with Para. Inside each of these top-level folders, I have individual folders for the specific projects, areas, resources, and archives that make up my life. For example, here are the folders for each one of my active projects. Inside these folders live the actual notes that contain my ideas. The number of active projects usually ranges from 5 to 15 for the average person. Notice that the number of notes inside each one indicated by the number in parentheses after the title varies greatly, from just 2 to over 200 for the book you're reading right now. Here are the notes found within a typical project folder for a mid-sized project, a remodel of our garage into a home studio, which we'll dive deeper into in subsequent chapters. The left half of the window displays a list of the 27 notes within this folder. Clicking a note, such as the one shown above containing a collection of photos we used to inspire our own remodel, reveals its contents in the right half of the window. That's it, just 3 levels of hierarchy to encompass the thousands of notes I've accumulated over the years. The top-level Para categories, the project folder, and the notes themselves. Here is what some of my areas look like. Each of these folders contains the notes relevant to each of those ongoing areas of my life. Areas related to my business begin with FL for Ford Labs, so they appear together in alphabetical order. Here are some of the notes in the health area. Under resources, I have folders for each of the topics I'm interested in. This information isn't currently actionable, so I don't want it cluttering up my projects, but it will be ready and waiting if I ever need it. The archives contain any folder from the previous 3 categories that is no longer active. I want them completely out of sight and off my mind, but in case I ever need to access research, learnings, or material from the past, it will always be preserved. Para can be used across all the different places where you store information. meaning you can use the same categories and the same rules of thumb no matter where you keep content. For example, here is the documents folder on my computer, and the folders for each one of my active projects. Inside these folders live the files that I use to execute each project. Here is the project folder dedicated to the book you're reading right now. Where do I put this? How to decide where to save individual notes? Setting up folders is relatively easy. The harder question that strikes fear into the heart of every organizer is, where do I put this? Apps have made it extremely easy to capture. Content is just a click or a tap away. However, we are given no guidance for what to do next. Where does a note go once it's been created? What is the correct location for an incoming file? The more material piles up, the more urgent and stressful this problem becomes. The temptation when initially capturing notes is to also try to decide where they should go and what they mean. Here's the problem. The moment you first capture an idea is the worst time to try to decide what it relates to. First, because you've just encountered it and haven't had any time to ponder its ultimate purpose. But more importantly, because forcing yourself to make decisions every time you capture something adds a lot of friction to the process. This makes the experience mentally taxing and thus less likely to happen in the first place. This is why it's so important to separate capture and organize into two distinct steps. Keeping what resonates in the moment is a separate decision from deciding to save something for the long term. Most notes apps have an inbox or daily notes section where new notes you've captured are saved until you can revisit them and decide where they belong. Think of it as a waiting area where new ideas live until you are ready to digest them into your second brain. Separating the capturing and organizing of ideas helps you stay present. Notice what resonates and leave the decision of what to do with them to a separate time, such as a weekly review, which I will cover in Chapter 9. Once you've captured a batch of notes and it's time to organize them, Para comes into play. The four main categories are ordered by actionability to make the decision of where to put notes as easy as possible. Projects are most actionable because you're reworking on them right now and with a concrete deadline in mind. Areas have a longer time horizon and are less immediately actionable. Resources may become actionable depending on the situation. Archives remain inactive unless they are needed. This order gives you as a convenient checklist for deciding where to put a note, starting at the top of the list and moving down. In which project will this be most useful? If none, in which area will this be most useful? If none, which resource does this belong to? If none, placing archives. In other words, you are always trying to place a note or file not only where it will be useful, but where it will be useful the soonest. By placing a note in a project folder, you ensure you'll see it next time you work on that project. By placing it in an area folder, you'll come across it next time you're thinking about that area of your work or life. By placing it in a resource folder, you'll notice it only if and when you decide to dive into that topic and do some reading or research. By placing it in archives, you never need to see it again unless you want to. It can be easy to let our projects and goals fall by the wayside when life gets busy. Personal projects and long-term goals feel especially flexible, like you can always get around to them later. Notes, bookmarks, highlights, and research that we worked hard to find sink deeper and deeper into our file systems until eventually we forget they even exist. Organizing by actionability counteracts our tendency to constantly procrastinate and postpone our aspirations to some far-off future. Para pulls these distant dreams into the here and now by helping us see that we already have a lot of the information we need to get started. The goal of organizing our knowledge is to move our goals forward, not get a PhD in note-taking. Knowledge is best applied through execution, which means whatever doesn't help you make progress on your projects is probably detracting from them. Organizing information like a kitchen. What am I making? There is a parallel between para and how kitchens are organized. Everything in a kitchen is designed and organized to support an outcome of preparing a meal as efficiently as possible. The archives are like the freezer terms are in cold storage until they are needed, which could be far into the future. Resources are like the pantry available for using any meal you make, but neatly tucked away out of sight in the meantime. Areas are like the fridge items that you plan on using relatively soon, and that you want to check on more frequently. Projects are like the pots and pans cooking on the stove items you are actively preparing right now. Each kind of food is organized according to how accessible it needs to be for you to make the meals you want to eat. Imagine how absurd it would be to organize a kitchen instead by kind of food. Fresh fruit, dried fruit, fruit juice, and frozen fruit would all be stored in the same place, just because they all happen to be made of fruit. Yet this is exactly the way most people organize their files and notes, keeping all their book notes together just because they happen to come from books, or all their saved quotes together just because they happen to be quotes. Instead of organizing ideas according to where they come from, I recommend organizing them according to where they are going specifically. The outcomes that they can help you realize. The true test of whether a piece of knowledge is valuable is not whether it is perfectly organized and neatly labeled, but whether it can have an impact on someone or something that matters to you. Para isn't a filing system, it's a production system. It's no use trying to find that perfect place where a note or file belongs. There isn't one. The whole system is constantly shifting and changing in sync with your constantly changing life. This is a challenging idea for a lot of people to wrap their head around. We are used to organizational systems that are static and fixed. We expect to find a strict set of rules that tells us exactly where each item goes, like the precise call numbers for books in a library. When it comes to our personal knowledge, there is no such assigned spot. We are organizing for actionability, and what's actionable is always changing. Sometimes we can receive one text message or email and the entire landscape of our day changes, because our priorities can change at a moment. As notice, we have to minimize the time we spend filing, labeling, tagging, and maintaining our digital notes. We can't run the risk of all that effort going to waste. Any piece of information, whether a text, document, an image, a note, or an entire folder, can and should flow between categories. You might save a note on coaching techniques to a project folder called coaching class for a class you're taking. Later, when you become a manager at work and need to coach your direct reports, you might move that note to an area folder called direct reports. At some point you might leave that company, but still remain interested in coaching, and move the note to resources. One day you might lose interest in the subject altogether and move it to the archives. In the future, that note could find its way all the way back to projects when you decide to start a side gig as a business coach, making that knowledge actionable once again. The purpose of a single note or group of notes can and does change over time as your needs and goals change. Every life moves through seasons, and your digital notes should move along with them, churning and surfacing new tidbits of insight from the deep waters of your experience. Completed projects are the oxygen of your second brain. Your efforts to capture content for future use will be tremendously easier and more effective if you know what that content is for. Using Para is not just about creating a bunch of folders to put things in. It is about identifying the structure of your work and life, what you are committed to, what you want to change, and where you want to go. I had to learn this lesson the hard way. Back in college, I worked part-time at an Apple store in San Diego while I finished my studies. At the time it was one of the 5 busiest Apple stores in the world, with thousands of people walking through our doors every day. It was there that I got my first taste of teaching people how to use computers more effectively. I taught morning classes to small groups of people who had just bought their first Mac, and also did one-on-one consultation sessions. This was the golden age of Apple's alive suite of creative software. Every single Mac computer came pre-installed with user-friendly apps for creating websites, recording music, printing photo books, and making videos. It was like having a complete multimedia studio at your fingertips at no additional cost. I would sit down with customers and answer any questions they had about the new computer they had just bought. In most cases, they had just migrated all their files over from Windows, and years of accumulated documents lay scattered across their desktop and documents folders. At first, I tried guiding them through organizing each document one at a time. It quickly became clear that this didn't work at all. The one-on-one sessions were only 1 hour, not nearly enough time to make even a dent in the hundreds or even thousands of files they had. It wasn't time well spent anyway, because these were often old documents that weren't relevant to their current goals or interests. I knew I needed a new approach. I started asking questions and listening, and eventually realized that these people didn't need or want an organized computer. They had spent all this money and time moving to a Mac because there was something they wanted to create or achieve. They wanted to make a video for their parents' anniversary party, a website for their cupcake shop, or a record showcasing their band songs. They wanted to research their family genealogy, graduate from college, or land a better job. Everything else was just an obstacle to get past on the way to their goal. I decided to take a different approach. I took all the files they'd migrated over and moved them all to a new folder titled Archive plus the date, for example. Archive. There was always a moment of fear and hesitation. At first, they didn't want anything to get lost, but very quickly, as they saw that they would always be able to access anything from the past, I watched them come alive with a renewed sense of hope and possibility. They had repeatedly postponed their creative ambitions to some far-off, mythical time when somehow everything would be perfectly in order. Once we set that aside and just focused on what they actually wanted to do right now, they suddenly gained a tremendous sense of clarity and motivation. For a while, I was sure this would come back to haunt me. Eventually, they'd want to go back and organize all those old files. I would often see the same people coming back to our store again and again. I waited expectantly in fear for someone to return and accuse me of losing all their old files. Let me tell you, no one ever did. Not once did someone come back and say, "You know, I'd really like to go back and organize all those files from my old computer." What they did tell me were the stories of the impact their creative projects had on their families, on their business, on their grades, on their career. One person organized a fundraising drive for a friend who had recently been diagnosed with leukemia. Another put together a successful application for a small business loan to start a dance studio. One student told me that the ability to tame the chaos of her digital world was the only reason she had finished college as the first graduate from her family. The details of how they organized their computer or took notes were trivial, but the impact their creativity had on their own lives and the lives of others, that was anything but. There are a few lessons I took away from this experience. The first is that people need clear workspaces to be able to create. We cannot do our best thinking and our best work when all the stuff from the past is crowding and cluttering our space. That's why that archiving step is so crucial. You're not losing anything, and it can't all be found via search, but you need to move it all out of sight and out of mind. Second, I learned that creating new things is what really matters. I'd see a fire light up in people's eyes when they reached the finish line and published that slideshow or exported that video or printed that resume. The newfound confidence they had in themselves was unmistakable as they walked out of the store knowing they had everything they needed to move forward. I've learned that completed creative projects are the blood flow of your second brain. They keep the whole system nourished, fresh, and primed for action. It doesn't matter how organized, aesthetically pleasing, or impressive your note-taking system is. It is only the steady completion of tangible wins that can infuse you with a sense of determination, momentum, and accomplishment. It doesn't matter how small the victories. Even the tiniest breakthrough can become a stepping stone to more creative, more interesting futures than you can imagine. Your turn, move quickly, touch lightly. A mentor of mine once gave me a piece of advice that has served me ever since. Move quickly and touch lightly. She saw that my standard approach to my work was brute force. To stay late at the office, fill every single minute with productivity, and power through mountains of work as if my life depended on it. That wasn't a path to success, it was a path to burnout. Not only did I exhaust my mental and physical reserves time and again, my frontal assaults weren't even very effective. I didn't know how to set my intentions, craft a strategy, and look for sources of leverage that would allow me to accomplish things with minimal effort. My mentor advised me to move quickly and touch lightly instead, to look for the path of least resistance and make progress in short steps. I want to give the same advice to you. Don't make organizing your second brain into yet another heavy obligation. Ask yourself, what is the smallest, easiest step I can take that moves me in the right direction? When it comes to para, that step is generally to create folders for each of your active projects in your Notes app and begin to fill them with the content related to those projects. Once you have a home for something, you tend to find more of it. Start by asking yourself, what projects am I currently committed to moving forward? And then create a new project folder for each one. Here are some questions to ask yourself to help you think of the projects that might be on your plate. Notice what's on your mind. What's worrying you that you haven't taken the time to identify as a project? What needs to happen that you're not making consistent progress on? Look at your calendar. What do you need to follow up on from the past? What needs planning and preparation for the future? Look at your to-do list. What actions are you already taking that are actually part of a bigger project you've not yet identified? What communication or follow-up actions you've scheduled with people are actually part of a bigger project? Look at your computer desktop, downloads folder, documents folder, bookmarks, emails, or open browser tabs. What are you keeping around because it is part of a larger project? Here's some examples of projects my students have come up with. Find new doctor who accepts my insurance. Plan goals and agenda for annual team retreat. Collect list of common food supplies and set up recurring deliveries. Develop content strategy for next quarter. Review draft of new reimbursement policy and provide feedback. Share collaboration ideas with research partner. Research and draft article on health equity. Complete online course on creative writing. You could also create folders for your areas and resources, but I recommend starting only with the projects to avoid creating lots of empty containers. You can always add others later when you have something to put inside them. Although you can and should use Para across all the platforms where you store information. 3 most common ones besides a note-taking app are the Documents folder on your computer, cloud storage drives like Dropbox, and online collaboration suites like Google Docs. I recommend starting with just your Notes app for now. Practice capturing new notes, organizing them into folders, and moving them from one folder to another. Each time you finish a project, move its folder wholesale to the archives. And each time you start a new project, look through your archives to see if any past project might have assets you can reuse. As you create these folders and move notes into them, don't worry about reorganizing or cleaning up any existing notes. You can't afford to spend a lot of time on old content that you're not sure you're ever going to need. Start with a clean slate by putting your existing notes in the archives for safekeeping. If you ever need them, they'll show up in searches and remain just as you left them. Your goal is to clear your virtual workspace and gather all the items related to each active project in one place. Once you do, you'll gain the confidence and clarity to take action on those ideas, rather than letting them pile up with no end in sight. The key thing to keep in mind is that these categories are anything but final. Para is a dynamic, constantly changing system, not a static one. Your second brain evolves as constantly as your projects and goals change, which means you never have to worry about getting it perfect or having it finished. In the next chapter, we'll look at how to distill the knowledge we've gathered to be able to put it to use effectively. Para is a Greek word that means side by side, as in parallel. This convenient definition reminds you as that our second brain works side by side with our biological brain. As you can probably tell, I'm a big fan of 4-letter frameworks. Researchers have called it the magic number because it is the highest number that we can count at a glance and hold in our minds without extra effort. I will use the term folder to refer to the main unit of organization used by most notes apps. Some software instead uses tags, which work just as well.